Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, the MHA What If with another fanfiction. This is the move of what if Deku was trapped in a coffin? All credits for this video go to their respective authors, so please support the real author. Check out the link in the description for more details. Please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. Midoriya shivered. Why was it so cold? Midoriya liked to sleep in a colder room as his mother always said it was for a better night's sleep, and he agreed. Not like the cold bothered him with his 7 All Might-themed blankets sprawled across his bed. No, he doesn't get cold. But yet, he's so cold, he's shivering. Gee, he huffs, turning over to get comfortable, grabbing at the invisible blankets. Slowly, he opened his eyes. This was not his room. This wasn't even a room. Midoriya quickly sat up only to smack his head hard on the ceiling. Ceiling? The force sends him back to the cold metal floor, his hand shooting up to rub his forehead. Wait, he mumbles, panic slowly setting in. He wades his arms around. Cold metal walls entrap him on all sides. He kicks his feet and shimmies his way up and down. There are maybe 4 inches from the back wall to his feet. The ceiling is only a couple of inches from his nose. The walls, the ceiling, the darkness, either so close. Midoriya took a deep breath. He needed to calm down. He had no answers yet. Until he knows something, he needs to keep a level head, like All Might would. He took a deep breath and looked around. Or at least felt. His hands could only move so much before hitting the walls. They were metal and cracked? He could feel where the metal met the other pieces, so the box he was in was wielded. His punches could break through walls, so a piece of metal would be nothing. But with maybe a 3-inch windup, there wouldn't be any moment or room for him to get a powered punch in. He couldn't flick his way out either, as metal shrapnel might kill him. Kicks were also out of the question. No room for his leg to bend. Midoriya started to cough when he realized he mumbled it all. That was wasted air. He couldn't speak. He read somewhere that a normal-sized coffin had about 5 hours. He didn't know where he was, but there was no air filtration system in this box. It was only his breath that filled the air, so if he was asleep or unconscious for half that time, he would be down to maybe 2.5 hours. The panic started to bubble, but he pushed it to the side for now. Survival instincts now. Emotions later. Midoriya patted his left hand around when something smooth, long, and thin hit his fingers, along with something colder than the metal encasing him. He grabbed the small thing first and fingered it up. When he squeezed it a bit hard, a faint crack echoed off the walls while a soft green light lit up the space. A glow stick. Midoriya was about to crack it up again, but that would just waste the glow stick's time. He didn't need lots of light for a short amount of time. No, he just needed light for a long time. The cold object was a plastic water bottle that would stay sealed for the time being. He didn't want to waste water for however long he was here for, nor did he want to quicken his possible death if it was drugged. He maneuvered the water bottle to his armpit area for ease of access and continued to pat around. A hard rectangular object met with his fingers. He felt a long fat buttons were and a large circle-like thing on the side. A tape recorder? He hit the first button. Midoriya Izuku, a low distorted voice sounded out. I apologize we must speak like this, but know you, your abilities, and more importantly, your connections. The voice paused before continuing. My name does not matter now. What does is your survival, Midoriya Izuku. I want you to survive. I want you to live and become a great hero. If the sports festival was anything to go by, you would make a great hero dash. Then would you kidnap me? Midoriya mumbled as he brought the recorder closer to his ear. This has nothing to do with you either. This has to do with pro heroes and your UA teachers. I won't say as the past does not matter. The future does. More importantly, yours. Your situation right now is a test for them. How much do they really care about their students? Out of a student body of 2,000 children, how far will they go for just one? Will they fail and move on like nothing happened? Will your teachers bring up your death? Will UA even announce your disappearance? Or will the entire school just sweep you under the rug, forgotten and discarded? The voice shook as it continued. UA is not as great as the public says. This year only villain attacks have overrun your class only. How are students supposed to learn to protect others if their own teachers can't do the same for them? They say lead by example, but those teachers are no example to be followed. Pro heroes are supposed to save, protect, and remember. They don't do that now. They forget students like you, Midoriya. The ones who try so hard and push themselves to just get the mere glance of a pro and look away. I believe that you would make a great hero. The question is, do they? There was silence as those words sunk unbelievably low in Midoriya. You have 5 days in your situation as I have handled the air quantity. More than enough time for them to find you. However, you and the other dorm members of your school were drugged. You should have woken up not too long after I left you. Air supply doesn't depend on you either, but your so-called teachers of UA. I've said it once, and I'll say it again. I hope you make it out alive, Midoriya Izuku. I hope you make a greater hero than the ones you know and worship. Goodbye, hero. The recording ended. Midoriya just stopped. Was he going to die here? What did UA have to do with anything? His teachers? Will they find him in time? How long has he been here? How much time does he have left? Will he die? What? Be trapped in this limbo forever? The slow build of panic began to snowball into full-on panic as he laid out the facts. He's in a box. With limited air supply. It's dark, cold, and small. Was he buried alive? Midoriya's heartbeat picked up the pace. This was a dream. Not a training drill. This was real life. This was actually happening. To him. Right now. He was buried alive. His friends were drugged. And he's alone with no one there to save him. Buried in the ground. In the ground. 6 feet under. Under where people are. Where people are. People are. People. His people. Was he the only one taken? Who took him? Where was he? How long has he been here? It's a coffin. He has a limited amount of air. Not enough air to panic. To panic. Panic. Not enough air. Not enough. Help. Help. Someone. Please. He needs help. To get out. Out alive. He needs help? Help. 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 So Mepni? Help me. His breaths got too much for him. Breathing in too hard and exhaling too softly. He blacked out before he could say any more, completely oblivious to the hidden camera in the corner or at the horrible timing that he awoke. Midoriya Izuku was buried 6 feet underground. Time, 12:15 a.m. Aizawa rolled over with a satisfying snap, crackle, and pop of his bones. It was Saturday, meaning no early wake-ups and no late-night patrols. Instead, he was tucked underneath a black comforter and resting upon his overpriced but very much worth it futon. It was cool in his room. Dim from his shades and quiet with the walls. Honestly, just the way he liked it. Aizawa stretched out with a loud but muffled groan. A good groan from a surprisingly good night's sleep, but a groan because he's awake now. He sat up and rubbed his face before begrudgingly getting ready. While he'd much rather sleep the sun away, he was on payroll and had to teacher-like duties to get the teacher-like paycheck. Also, he needed to check up on his students. Knowing them, they were all either passed out in the kitchen making midnight brownies or still up from all-nighters. He'd let them do whatever as long as they were within curfew and didn't set the place on fire, like last time. The talk with Todoroki was both a funny and a serious one. Apparently, he got spooked by Kirishima's antics and set his clothes on fire, which then spread to the communal couch where the others were sitting. That night ended with Mizurufu's fire department getting a close-up view of the dorms and detention for several of the students. When he walked to his desk in the teacher's lounge the next day, he saw an envelope with the peppermint-haired boy's tight scrawl and a credit card. When he flipped it over, his reputation for not laughing or smiling was almost over. The card belonged to one Todoroki Enji, also known as Endeavor. For the expenses and anything else you want? Todoroki Shoto. P.S. The card has no limit. Aizawa didn't call Endeavor that day, but he did drop his card off at the man's agency anonymously. He didn't want that talk with either Todoroki, so he just pretended it didn't happen. On his way out the dorm's door, he noticed the lounge area was empty. Normally, Aizawa was the last one up of many teachers who lived there. All Might was typically the first as he does training with Midoriya in the morning. Snipe and Cementos next at normal waking hours, followed by Nemuri and Hisashi. The others would trickle out at other times, but all were up by at least 9 o'clock. He looked at the doorway where all shoes were sitting, untouched from yesterday night. Aizawa narrowed his eyes as he looked in the sink. Each apartment had its own kitchenette, but some teachers liked the communal one better. No mugs, plates, or silverware. He looked outside the windows where the sun was up and shining. He glanced down at his phone. Maybe there was a meeting he forgot about. 2:12 p.m. Aizawa stopped. 2:12 p.m.? Aizawa stopped. No way he slept in that long. He may enjoy the casual cat nap and sorts, but his circadian rhythm has been trained to not sleep a full night into the afternoon. Nothing extraneous happened yesterday night, so there was no reason for a late sleepin'. Aizawa opened his phone and looked for any alerts from Nizu or anyone. No new notifications. He scrunched his eyebrows. It would make sense if none of his coworkers were here. After all, it was a Saturday and people do have social lives, nothing Aizawa was jealous of. Everyone had their own shoes in their rooms, so it'd make sense why everyone was still there. Aizawa shook his thoughts and continued to the Heights Alliance. He typically checks up on them every morning, but not many would care if he was a few hours late. Aizawa turtled into his scarf against the cold wind. Chilly, windy and sunny. Quiet, a peaceful day. He slowly walked up to the building steps and scanned his ID card. Pro Hero, Eraserhead. Aizawa Shoda. Access granted, an automated voice cheered. Aizawa swung the door open, thinking about all the grading he still had to do. Maybe he'll get Hisashi to help him? He still owed him for last week's bar outing, anyway. Expecting a room full of teens all talking about training or homework, it is silent. Empty. No one there. Not in the kitchen, not in the common area. No teas or coffee or lunches are made. No music is being played from Jiro's room, nor any swears from Bakugo. No laughter, no shouts, no banterings, nothing. It was quiet. Too quiet. Hello. Aizawa called out, setting his papers down on the table. It wasn't his birthday, so no surprise parties there, and it wasn't any of the students either. No field trips would have happened without him. Nothing could have been going on to have completely quieted the teachers' dorms and Class 1 as suspicious. Aizawa walked to the kitchen, passing the floor vents when he froze. Something minty was coming out of it. Aizawa took a hesitant sniff of the air. Maybe it was one of the girls' perfumes or Sato's extracts. Sure. Aizawa quickly dropped everything he was holding and held his sleeve up to his nose. He knew that smell. It was a narcotic gas well known on the black market. A minty-smelling drug that could knock out even All Might out for a day. It was usually harmless, but in their sleep, they wouldn't wake up. Not until a body naturally wore it off. Simply, they would be in a mini-coma. Aizawa quickly rushed to the windows and doors, opening them all up as much as they would allow. He tried not to breathe too deeply as he ran to the kitchen and started grabbing towels, tying one around his face. It wouldn't do much for him not breathing the drug in, but it would slow the process. He tied it tight before going for the rooms. He pulled out his phone and dialed All Might. If Aizawa was awake, that means the drug he assumed the teachers were gassed with too had worn off. Everyone now was just sleeping, and being All Might's dorm neighbor, Aizawa knew how light the man slept. After 2 rings, the man groggily answered. Aizawa? What can I help you with? Get to the 1A dorms. Get as many teachers as you can. There's been an attack, Aizawa quickly yelled, not even trying to be quiet. He stopped stare after stares, hoping the vibrations would wake Jiro or someone up. Aizawa, All Might's voice much more awake and serious. Aizawa could hear blankets ruffling in the back. What happened? Give me a report. Students have been drugged. We have 2. Get down here quickly. Try not to breathe too much. The gas is still here. Be there in 2. They both hung up as Aizawa broke through another door. The cursed mint smell wafted through the halls. He didn't smell any of this in the teachers' dorms. Was there a higher dosage in the students' dorms? If so, that would mean every student here would not be able to hear Aizawa, and he couldn't carry all 20 students without falling prey to the gas himself. Thinking fast, Aizawa reached the 5th floor first. He shot down the hall, hitting the doors as loud as possible, hoping at least someone was up. Get up. Everyone outside, he yelled. He's already let his students down enough. He couldn't do it again. Let's go, come on. Get up. Now. He reached the end of the hall where a red button encased in glass sat. He elbowed the glass and slammed the emergency button. Immediately, the alarms were raised and blaring with flashing red lights across every hallway, area, and dorm room. Aizawa knew the police would be notified, as would every alarm both within the school, facilities, and other dorm buildings go off also. He kicked Ciro's door open hard, its handle wedging itself in the wall behind it. Aizawa jumped over start books and dirty laundry to his unconscious student tucked under his covers. He looked, simply, asleep. And that got Aizawa worried. Ciro? Ciro, it's Aizawa. We gotta go. Wake up. Wake up. At the silent response, Aizawa swore, picking up the kid and carrying him to the window where a fireproof slide was waiting for them on every floor. It was an invention a student from the support classes created for fire emergencies in bigger and higher-up buildings. Aizawa quickly dropped the student onto the slide and let go. He hated the fact that he had to literally push his students out of windows, no matter how many times he's threatened Mineta with it, but it was either that or leave them vulnerable to whoever set this attack up. Aizawa watched as Ciro gently rolled out onto the grass, unharmed and unconscious, before going to Ajui's, Todoroki's, Sadu's and Yayarosa's rooms. The 5th floor was finished as he stumbled to the 4th, where he could hear someone shouting. "Let's go, listeners." Up-ended him, Mix Quirk yelled out. It was loud. Louder than usual, and for once, Aizawa was happy his eardrums throbbed. He rounded the stairway to see Kirishima limp in his arms. "Wake up, young Ishido. Young Bakugo," All Might's voice yelled. Still smiling for the hero hopefuls, Aizawa could see the worried glint in his eye. The buffed-up man had Bakugo looking too peaceful over his shoulder and Ishido cradled in his arms. They had the 4th floor covered. "Hizashi! All Might! Take the 3rd floor too." "I've got the 2nd, Aizawa yelled when something inside him pulled. His sense started to tingle and his body felt heavier. Aizawa shook off the creeping effects of the drug and stumbled down to the 2nd floor, banging on every surface he could reach. Only half of the 2nd floor was occupied, which made it easier for Aizawa to throw everyone out the window. He kicked open Mineta's door and carried him out. He was by far the lightest, so he took both him and Tokoyami out simultaneously. He gently rolled them down the inflatable slide and watched them hit the grass before returning for the others. Ryuma was next, and last was Murderia. Aizawa, now panting and stumbling more than before, threw a weak kick at the door. It didn't open. Was the drug already acting on him? One student. He had one student left. He had to get him out. Get him to safety. His next kick blew the door wide open, ruffling the All Might posters inside. The room was cold, colder than Aizawa's, colder than the entire building. He let the chill run through his body as he marched for the bed. His legs were shaking and his mind seemed to fog, but again, Aizawa fought it off. He was so close. Midoriya? Midoriya was right here, right in F-front. Shit, he breathed as his vision started to blacken. The sounds of the alarms began to muffle. The smell of mint stung his nose. Mint? Aizawa jumped to the side of the bed as the smell of mint got stronger and stronger. The invisible pull begged for his body to follow. His head was getting heavy and his shoulders were wobbly. Every part of him wanted to give in, but he couldn't. Not when his students needed him. Not now. Not when Midoriya was right here. He rubbed his eyes as he reached out for the mass under the blankets. Expecting a warm shoulder, his hands grasped around nothing? Aizawa's heart stopped. He pushed the multiple layers of All Might-themed blankets off the bed and through the pillows behind him, but no matter how bare the bed got, it didn't change the fact there was no one in it. His student was gone. Midoriya Izuku was missing. Time, 2:56 p.m. Midoriya's senses were slowly coming to him. He opened his eyes to a barely visible green light in his right hand and a tape recorder in his left. The memories of what happened yesterday, no hours before? 2 days ago? 3 minutes? He had no sense of time and no way out. Midoriya laid there, quiet, still, as if he looked dead enough, they would let him out. As if he behaved somehow, they would release him. As if he just suffered, they would let him be. How long has it been? Days? Hours? Minutes? Seconds? He just laid there. He had no room to stretch out, to roll over, to move. He simply had no room. The thought got his heart pounding. His hands sweaty, mouth dry, stomach nasouse, lungs constricting so hard, Midoriya didn't have to worry about using up air as his own body wouldn't let him breathe. It sent his body into the second wave of panic. A type of panic when the body is so freaked out, not even the mind could control it. His breaths got deeper, sharper, so tight, not even sound could escape. He was alone. He had no one. He couldn't move, couldn't breathe. He was going to die. That thought cracked him. That fear, raw, unaltered, reasonless fear, was enough to shock whatever frozen trap panic had set on him. Like a sponge wrung out, Midoriya's lungs unhinged as he drew in a loud, expensive breath. All to yell one thing. Help, Midoriya choked. Help. Help me. Someone. Please dash. No one answered. Please. Midoriya shouted, desperate for anyone to come. Something in him started rattling, getting restless, anxious. He started tossing and turning only to get wedged between the top and bottom of the coffin. His coffin. It was the straw that broke the camel's back. Midoriya powered up one for all and started pounding on the ceiling. He didn't care if the coffin would collapse. He didn't care if he was going to get suffocated by the dirt. He didn't care that he would die slower that way or that no one would be able to save him if he did break the coffin. He didn't care. He just needed out. Let me out. 5% did nothing. 10% dislocated his wrist. 20% bruised his bones. He threw all injuries out the window and went 50%, shattering his hand and doing nothing to the metal. He kept punching the ceiling while kicking hopelessly at the walls. He screamed and screamed till his voice was no more. Tears started to pool in his hair, mixing with the sweat on the ground. Whatever feeling racking his body felt so instinctive, so survival-like. This was a battle of fight or flight, and Midoriya tried desperately to run away. Help me! Please, someone. Please! He drew out every vowel as he tried to catch his quick breathing. He kept punching at the ceiling even with his shattered wrist. The pain was nothing compared to the overwhelming shadow of despair, anxiety, and panic that was swallowing him whole. Let me out. Let me out. Please. His voice wheezed. I'll do anything. Just let me out. He couldn't think. He couldn't breathe. He couldn't see. He kept trying to move. Wiggle. Worm his way out somewhere. He just needed to move. To breath. To do something more than nothing. He screamed again. Cried aloud. Called for someone. Anyone. His punches lost form. Kicks lacked technique. He flailed inside the box like a fish out of water, like a child too restless for their stroller. He clawed at the ceiling and the walls till his fingernails were broken and bloody. He elbowed at the ceiling and the walls till his limbs were numb. Some throws with one for all and others will sheer panic fueling them. He looked around feeling so lost. So helpless. So useless. It felt as if the very wall would cave and crush him to death. Aizawa-sensei. Please help me. Help me. Help me. Let me out. Please, sensei. I'm sorry. He screamed for his teacher to come to save him. To let him out. To rescue him. Midoriya wedged himself between the walls and pushed, one for all coursing through his legs and arms. All might. All might. Please. Help me. He screamed. He kept pushing, kicking, elbowing, anything to keep the walls at bay. It did nothing. He did it over and over and over again. Each with the same pitiful result. His breathing was deep and hard, but no matter how many in and out breaths, his body couldn't get enough. His pathetic cries and tiny useless yelps fell to deaf ears as he continued to fight the coffin. Over and over until he got tired. His arms were tired. His legs were tired and the green lighting just showed how little room he had. Midoriya dissolved into a hopeless fit of tears, not even caring about how many hours worth of air he just used up. His hands pitifully slapped at the ceiling while the stress of everything pulled him back into an unwilling unconscious. Unknown to him, it was only the beginning of day 1. Time, 2:42 p.m. There was something in his arm. His eyes hurt. His body hurt. Eats plugged. Head aching. Cold. Aizawa? A soft beeping of a heart monitor told him he was in a hospital, as did the sweet smell of chemical antiseptic. His eyes wanted to stay close, but his head forced them open. He blinked a few times at the ceiling's white lights before rubbing them. Aizawa? Are you all right? He wasn't wearing his clothes. His uniform, black, flexible, warm, was nowhere to be seen. Instead, he had white scrubs on, all without the UA logo, meaning he was off campus. In a hospital? Of campus? His eyes caught the window scenery. The sky was a dark blue. The kind where it could be either dawn or dusk. If Aizawa was 10 years younger, he'd be getting off his patrols. A few stray leaves fluttered in the wind while trees swayed with the October breeze. There was a kind of serenity that came with these kinds of hours. Everything existed. Everything was still. Whether it be the day winding down or the night receding back into the west, this time overlap never failed to stop Aizawa. It was beautiful. Aizawa turned to his right where All Might sat deflated in a chair. His hair was almost as disheveled, hair more wild than usual and unusual bags weighing heavy under his eyes. He looked so small, so defeated, so broken. But All Might, Aizawa acknowledged, wincing silently as he sat up. Why am I here? Aizawa, do you not remember? All Might's soft voice asked. Aizawa turned towards the man who was refusing to meet his eye contact. Not remember what? Keith, slowly. Aizawa had no idea why he was in the infirmary. Last he remembered was getting up Saturday. He remembered it was quiet in the teacher dorms and quieter in the students' dorms. He remembered fatigue, the pang of fear. All Might look up at Aizawa's face as the realization hit. There was an attack. Minty. Too minty for perfume. Too cold for an October day. Where are the students? It's the afternoon. You called me saying the dorms had been drugged. All Might continued. Get up. Everyone outside. He yelled. He's already let his students down enough. He couldn't do it again. Let's go, come on. Get up. Now. Mike and I cleared the 4th and 3rd floor. You cleared the 5th and 2nd? Young Ashindo. Young Bakugu. All Might's voice boomed out. Mike was shouting something in the back too. What was it? All the students were accounted for. He pushed the multiple layers of All Might-themed blankets off the bed and threw the pillows behind him, but no matter how bare the bed got, it didn't change the fact there was no one in it. Except one, All Might have trailed off. He looked away as his breathing got quicker. Aizawa raised his hand with scrunched eyebrows. He flexed his fingers and rotated his hand as his memories all came back to him. His student was gone. Where is Midoriya? Aizawa whispered. His blonde hair fell as his head lowered. He's gone. Midoriya Izuku is missing. He wanted to think that maybe Midoriya snuck out during the night and hasn't come back. Maybe it has something to do with his father and domestic issues? The majority of children who go missing are kidnapped by a family member, and Midoriya's father wasn't in the picture. Maybe he went into the woods to train and got lost? Made a bet that he lost and had to leave his dorms? Maybe he was just hiding? Maybe he caught the villain that did this and was hiding from the others? Maybe. Aizawa took a deep breath. Maybe Aizawa just failed. There was a dead silence. A horrible silence. His student. His problem child. His kid was gone. Missing. This would be the 6th time he's been caught up in something. 6th time he's failed his students. He failed Midoriya. Aizawa shook his thoughts. He would not think the worst. Not now. Not when he still had 19 other students on his watch. The other students. Where are they? Aizawa asked quickly, eyeing the folded clothes on a nearby table. It wasn't his uniform. There wasn't his capture weapon. Your hero uniform was still infused with the drug. Everyone's stuff was. Recovery girl has it, and the dorm's on lockdown as the place airs out. It's all we can do for now, All Might informed, eyeing Aizawa's line of sight. Mike dropped some stuff off for you. All of the teachers that were drugged are fine now. Mike and I were the only ones, after you, who got a second dose of it, but we are both fine. All Might looked oddly calm. Maybe it was compartmentalization that came with hero work, or maybe it was the shock delaying his reaction. Whatever it was, Aizawa was glad he didn't have to care for the number 1 hero and 19 students. Where are the students? This isn't UA, Aizawa said, throwing the blankets off him. He's been in Recovery Girl's office enough to know a room when he sees one. He yanked the 4 out of his arm and ripped the heart monitor off his chest. Immediately, the machine started to beep and a blue alarm went off. Outside the door, doctors and nurses could be heard tumbling after another when another voice shut them all up. Enough. This is Eraserhead's room. Knowing him, he ain't dead. Go help the other patients who aren't stupid enough to rip out their own heart monitors and scare the entire hospital. Recovery Girl's voice yelled. Aizawa felt a twang of guilt as he heard the mumbled apologies of the outside doctors. The door swung open to see a short, elderly woman with a cane and a syringe in her hair. She looked tired and irritated. Aizawa Shota, lay back down in that bed before I break your kneecaps and force you to, she threatened. Aizawa begrudgingly sat in the bed but did not lie down. He needed to be alert. The students, where are they? Aizawa asked again. He just wanted to know where they were. They are in quarantine together on the 11th floor. Everyone is awake except for Mineta and Aoyama, All Might answered, sensing Aizawa's irritation. Midoriya's neighbors? Aizawa asked worried. How long have they been sleeping? What if they never wake up? Are they all right? Side effects. Recovery Girl went to Aizawa's side and started to check his vitals before answering. Physically, a few had minor carpet burns from the slides and others a few cuts from the landing, but all were fine. With the exception of the 2 sleeping ones, everyone is fine. Some just missing their homeroom teacher. Aizawa shook the old woman off his arm and went to stand up again. He was still lightheaded and dizzy, but nothing he hasn't worked through before. He grabbed his clothes and went for the door when Recovery Girl's small but iron-tight grip grabbed his wrist. I have to go check on them. They need dash. Aizawa, Recovery Girl interrupted solemnly. She looked down, resembling the suddenly quiet All Might before speaking. You should know the time, first. Time? It's, Aizawa looked at the clock on the wall. 6:03. 6:03 a.m., Recovery Girl repeated. Sunday morning. Aizawa looked at the woman. What dash? All Might found you in Midoriya's room, passed out from the gas Saturday afternoon. It's 6:03 a.m., Sunday morning, Recovery Girl said slowly. You've been asleep since then. Aizawa let that hit him. He let that hit him hard. He took a moment to digest it. Chewed it around in his head before prominently throwing it out. He wasted an entire day asleep yesterday, yes, but he can't change that. He can only focus on the present, which is where his kids are. Where they need him. I'm fine. I'm going to see my students. All Might, come with me. They need their symbol of peace just as much as they need their teacher, Aizawa said, standing in the doorway. All Might nodded as the 2 teachers made their way through the blinding white hallways to the 11th floor. Aizawa quickly changed before they got to the elevator. With some small talk to the receptionist, the 2 were led into a large back room. A set of sliding doors separated 17 students from their 2 teachers. Each student had their own cot, packed tightly next to each other like sardines. While it didn't look like a comfy bed, most of them were probably too out of it to care. As the doors opened, Aizawa's foot stumbled. What was he supposed to say to them? Aizawa, their teacher, lost one of their own. The classmate. First Bakugo at the training camp and now Midoriya from his own bed? Their trust in him was no doubt broken. Would they still want him as a teacher? Would they hate him? Through curses and swears? He wouldn't blame them if they did. He deserved. Aizawa-sensei? The doors automatically slide open with a ding, alerting 2 students of their presence. 2 awake students. Ashido and Jiro were the only ones up, sitting across from each other on their cots. Ashido looked at him curiously while Jiro focused on his shoes. It was 6 in the morning and those 2 definitely weren't early birds. The receptionist told them that the drug was off all the students except the 2 still in their personal rooms, but the side effects had some students still more tired than others. Aizawa-sensei? Ashido asked in a quiet voice. She looked tired. The bags under her eyes and ruffled up hair just showed an unwilling All Might. Are you two all right? He asked first. All Might went wandering into the other parts of the room, watching over the sleeping students. He readjusted the blanket skewed over Bakugo. Yeah, Ashido said, looking up into Aizawa's eyes. Are you okay? We heard from the doctors that the teachers were drugged, she said, hesitantly, playing with her hospital clothes. The teachers are all fine, Aizawa said. Don't worry about me, Ashido. But you're our teacher. Of course, we'll worry about you. Bakugo and Kiri were about to break out to go see you, but Ida ended up tackling them both, knocking Kiri unconscious again, she said with her own laugh. She looked up at Aizawa's eyes and immediately backtracked. Sorry, I make jokes to ease up the heavy times, you know? I realize my timing isn't the best dash. Don't apologize, Ashido. You are doing everything right. Everyone copes in their own ways. Making humor and easing the tension works well for you and for others. You care about the ones around you just as much as you care about yourself. Never apologize for that, Aizawa scolded softly. Ashido's eyes widened at this softer side of him but nodded. Ah yes sir, she smiled. Jiro? Are you all right? He asked the purple-haired student. She was playing her ear jacks, wrapping them around her finger then watching undo themselves. Her eyes said there was something else eating her, but Aizawa couldn't tell what it was. She nodded, refusing to look up. Aizawa didn't push. It wasn't time for that. They'll come to him in their own time. Sensei, what happened? Ashido asked. Her body swayed as she talked, no doubt trying to keep herself awake. No one has told us anything. All Might hasn't even come until now. Aizawa chose his next words carefully. While Ashido and Jiro both looked like a feather could take them down, Aizawa knew how good their memory was. There was an attack on the dorms. The police are still following up on details, but you all are safe here. Ashido looked down and Jiro looked away. Aizawa didn't blame them, they were mad at him. Angry for losing one of their own. He understood. Thank you, she said. Aizawa looked down at his two students. I heard from the doctors you, Mike-sensei and All Might-sensei, threw us out of windows, she said with a tired giggle. Thank you for saving us. It's just my job. When this is over, sensei, I'll start a petition for teachers to get paid more, Ashido said with a big yawn, leaning back on her cot. When was the last time she slept? When did she wake up? You'll have my signature then, Aizawa said with a small smile. Ashido closed her eyes and fell instantly asleep. Jiro fell asleep too sometime in the middle of their conversation. He'll pull her aside later to ask her if everything's all right. It probably wasn't given everything that just happened, but still, a one-on-one talk would be beneficial to anyone. Aizawa pulled their blankets over their shoulders and walked over to All Might who was on the phone. He hung up when Aizawa approached him. Detective Tsukachi just called. There is something urgent the staff should see. We'll meet up at the school, All Might whispered. At Aizawa's nod, they made their way out of the hospital and back to UA. Time, 6:41 a.m. Detective Tsukachi sat in UA's biggest conference room. Desks lined the rows while large windows light the room. Tsukachi had the projection screen pulled down too. They'd need it for this meeting, the meeting that called every UA teacher from every subject, grade and subclass to discuss Midoriya Izuku's disappearance along with some newer details that the detective had acquired. Should I give them the option to watch it? He asked the small principal. It was just the two of them in the room. He looked across the rows and rows of seats, separated into categories. Nedzu had notified the staff of Friday night, but on Tsukasi's request, kept the details to a minimum. At the time, Tsukachi's team was still gathering information he was ready to share. They are all pros. They need to watch this, especially a certain two teachers, Nizu said, sipping his tea. Aizawa is up and going now too. He and All Might are on their way right now. They aren't going to be happy when I tell them. None of the staff will be, Tsukachi said, collapsing into one of the chairs. He didn't want to watch it again, to listen to it again. While he'd do what duties call for with honor, this kind of thing took a different kind of strength, one even the mightiest are bound to stumble. It's the nature of being both a pro and a teacher, Detective Tsukachi. Their students' well-being tops everything, including their own stomachs? The mouse bear rat dog said, his fur slightly ruffled. Netsu had seen the tapes too. He may not be human, but a child's scream shakes everyone, including the suited animal. As their precious time trickled on, a slow stream of teachers poured into the room. A few of the 1A teachers looked more tired than usual, all of whom were kept at the hospital for the night. Some cast curious glances at the detective while others silently nodded. They all knew Midoriya was missing and that the dorms were drugged, but that wasn't all this meeting was for. Eventually, all teachers were there except for two. Eraserhead and All Might were still nowhere to be found, but they were coming from the hospital. He'd give them time. After a few more mindless chattering moments, the doors opened for the last two guests. Aizawa looked dead. Having worked cases together in the past, Tsukachi knew Aizawa. He knew his dry humor, his witty sarcasm and his stiff personality that balanced between sophistication and narcosis. Today, though, all lazy elegance that is Aizawa Shoyuda was gone. Replaced by should-weight fatigue and mental exhaustion no amount of physical work could match. All Might looked the same. Thinner and tired, the symbol of peace hunched over himself. The man had no gray hairs, but Tsukachi could see how the stress was getting to his friend. He knew the close relationship between Midoriya and All Might, one that went beyond just successor and predecessor. After all, they hadn't had a conversation yet without the young teen coming up. All Might saw him as his own. In a situation like this, Tsukachi couldn't fault him for anything. Gentlemen, Nizu nodded to the newcomers. They took their seats in the front as Netsu addressed the rest of the room. For those of you who don't know, this is Detective Tsukachi of the Mizudafu Police Station, the lead detective on this case. Tsukachi bowed to the room. I believe many of you know why we are here. Friday night, the teacher and student dorm rooms of Class 1A were attacked. The drug used was TGWH34, also known as sleeping darkness. It's an easy-access drug that is used mostly in a medical setting for induced comas due to its dosage sleep time sensitivity. How did you know it's that drug? I've heard it's colorless when it's a gas? One of the heroes asked. Mint? Tsukachi looked at Aizawa, who looked directly at him. The gas has a strong mint smell. It was still lingering in the student dorms, which meant a double or triple dosage there compared to the teacher dorms. On the second floor, Midoriya Izuku's dorm was doused in it. It was strongest by the bed. He was targeted? Another asked. Yes, however before that, I want to update you on easier details. All teachers were unharmed from the drug, as were all 19 1A students. The teacher dorms and the Heights Alliance are closed by the recovery girl and should be available for everyone to return in a day or so, Tsukachi explained. He wanted to get the light-hearted stuff out of the way first. Was anyone else drugged? Other than the dorm buildings? Vlad King asked. No. By the time UA's alarms went off, all buildings were locked down and emergency personnel was contacted. So far, no other class or building was drugged. Whoever did this was directly attacked Class 1A. How are the students? Another asked. From what I know, 17 students were cleared this morning. 2 are still fighting off the drug and 1 is missing, he said bluntly. The drug was more concentrated in Midoriya Izuku's dorm. His neighbors, Mineta Minoru and Aoyama Yutaka, still under the normal dose. Everyone was affected with plus the triple dosage from Midoriya's room. Do we know why he's been taken? Midnight asked. Why would villains want a hero in training? Unless this is the work of the League. He's been a part of all the attacks and missions of UA. Stain Incident, Kamino Ward, Overhaul Raid. To come out on top in them all is a feat that potential villains could see as a threat. Midoriya is too strong of a hero. Cut him down and that one less symbol of peace you have to worry about, Aizawa said bitterly. He might have complimented the boy and put him on par with All Might, but paired with his tone in this situation, no one called him out on it. That was one thought, Tsukachi began. Aizawa's eyes locked with his own. We explored that reason along with a more personal one. His father is absent. Left when he was 4 years old. We also hypothesized that this was a dad coming back from the dead. Most kidnapped children are often taken by a family member after all, but based on some recent evidence, it is not the case. Evidence? New evidence? Why is it recent? What changed? Tsukachi took a breath as the murmuring got louder. This, he said, turning on the projector. I'll warn you now, there will be disturbing footage that will appear. You are all trained to handle situations like this, but it can still be difficult, Tsukachi said, looking down at his computer. Borderline horrific went unsaid. He clicked on a few tabs before pulling up a file with 2 links. At 4 p.m. Saturday night, a flash drive was dropped off at the station with some very strong evidence. Because of this has nothing to do with the League but with a completely different person. He pointed at the piece of plastic sticking outside of his computer. This was dropped off too. He tossed the evidence bag in front of All Might, who fingered the bag carefully. Midoriya's ID? Tsukachi nodded. To show that the flash drive was real and authentic. Typically, captors send more painful or living remnants of their victims, so I truly believe this person's goal is not to kill or harm Midoriya, no matter his situation. Tsukachi looked at all of the skeptical faces. He knew they wouldn't see it from his point of view and they may never, but the kidnapper could have sent anything of Midoriya's. A lock of hair? Fingernail? Toe? Something more painful? Something that would really scare the public? No, they send his school ID. This along with his captors. Messages, Tsukachi saw humanity in this person. Extremely distorted, but humanity still. What's his situation then? Aizawa asked, probably with more bite than intended. Again, Tsukachi understood. Aizawa knew the teen much more than he did. Hey, Eraser, Present Mike whispered, grabbing onto Aizawa's arm and holding him back. Take it easy. We're all worried for the boy Dash. He isn't just a boy, Mike, Aizawa said, looking up at Tsukachi. He's my student. My responsibility. He was under my protection and I lost him. This isn't exactly the moment to be withholding things. Aizawa, Nizu warned. Aizawa mumbled something before giving a silent apology. Please continue, detective. The room was silent as Tsukachi nodded. He understood, but that small slip of emotion just proved what he had to say. He had a feeling the hero won't be so kind after that talk, but that was for later. On the flash drive, there was a message for the staff of UA. I listened to it and made my notes, but I am no member of this school. With the exception of All Might, who was just hired this year, I hope some of you will be able to fill in some gaps for me. With a room of nods, he pressed play. Hello, a distorted voice greeted. The screen showed an audio recording with the voice's fluctuations going up and down on the graph. I would introduce myself, but you all know my name. I leave out UA's newest staff member, however. He would have no recollection of me and for that, I apologize for my actions. This does not concern you as it does with your coworkers, All Might. He is your student. A good one in fact. I am truly sorry for using him but it had to be done. The UA teachers needed their eyes opened and Midoriya Izuku was the perfect candidate. A strong, smart, innocent child whose the love of heroes fuels his everyday goals. I've told him myself that he'd made a great hero one day. I hope he makes it too. He seems like the type to save, smile, and remember his people. The boy, Midoriya, reminds me of someone I once lost, the voice said, tone dropping as they reminisced. They were like Midoriya. Blinded by UA's reputation and possessed by their lies, they fell off the pristine radar of Japan's #1 hero school. When they fell, no one tried to stop them. No one even remembered them. When I needed someone to be saved, someone to be protected, the heroes of UA did not deliver. Instead, you all left and forgot. It's been a while since it happened, but not a day goes by that I don't miss them, the voice cracked. A small bit of silence followed. I believe that heroes are supposed to save, protect, and remember. Not every victim they've saved or every person they pulled from a burning building, no. But every lesson they learned from their small encounter. Think of this like a second chance, heroes. You already lost one student in the past. Will you lose another? Do you care enough to risk everything for one student? I saw what All Might did and the sacrifice he made for the young blonde hero in Kamino Ward. He's a true hero. Midoriya Izuku chose well when looking for an idol. I hope you find him. He could have made a great hero. He still can too. So save him, you so-called heroes. Put everything on the line and remember. The voice recording stopped. No one spoke. How could they? What were they supposed to say? Tsukachi cleared his throat and looked down at his open computer. The live stream's still going on another tab. He swallowed as he looked up to the room of pro heroes and teachers alike. This was one of 2 links. Time, 8:02 a.m. Toshinori sat in the comfy padded chair. Drowning in his clothes and swirling thoughts, he continued to listen to Naomasa. His longtime friend was explaining something, but he couldn't focus. Not with what just played before. Not when his boy was out there. Cold. Alone. What kind of symbol of peace is that? Prepare yourselves. This isn't an easy video, Tsukachi said, grimly. Aizawa, All Might, Nizu called out. At any time you want this to stop, just raise your hands. Toshinori rose his head and looked at the tiny principal. Raise his hand for what? He saw Aizawa give a stiff nod next to him before following in the young hero's lead. What did he nod to though? Suddenly, the projection screen turned back on. This time it looked like there was an actual picture. Toshinori stared at the screen as the mouse hovered over the play button. It clicked and the Toshinori's ride to the darkness started. The screen was dark. Through the darkness, the camera was placed in the corner at the foot of this narrow-looking box. What is this? Blood King asked, livid. A game? Please, save your observations until afterwards, Nizu said. Toshinori didn't look around. He just stared at the screen as if it would somehow bring his boy back. Something in the box moved. Legs? It hit the side of the box and shook the camera a bit. There was no light, but an outline of a body could be seen. Oh my God, Aizawa whispered next to Toshinori. What's wrong? Present Mike asked somewhere in the room. Toshinori disregarded them all. What did Aizawa see? Just watch, Present Mike, Tsukachi said. All eyes were on the screen again. Silent. Something was humming in the background of the video. Are those snores? Midnight asked, straining her ears to the speakers. Oh my dash. The thing inside the box started to move and twitch. The thing felt through the air, grabbing at nothing. Gore, the thing said. It was Murderia's voice. There was more ruffling as fabric nudged up against each other until Midoriya shot up, smacking his head on some kind of metal top and was sent crashing down. Ow. He wasn't. More rustling and more silence. Wait, he couldn't be. Everyone could hear the soft taps of Midoriya's hands on the box. A few shakes on the camera showed he started to kick at the walls. More movement could be heard and skin against metal echoed through the box. The camera still couldn't see anything, but it did pick up most sounds. Quick breaths could be heard mixed in with slower, shakier ones. What's he saying? Someone asked. Meh. Welded, 3 inches, no power, flick, suffocate kicks, no room to bend. He's describing the different situations he could use to get out. The box he's in was welded shut. With only 3 inches for a wind-up, no punch would pack any power. If he flicks his way out, the dirt above him would suffocate him. He can't kick his way out either without any room to bend his knees, Aizawa deciphered, emotionless as always. Toshinori spared a glance at the stoic homeroom teacher. How could he speak like it was nothing? Like Midoriya's situation was an afternoon tea subject? How could he speak so nonchalantly about his student? His boy. His Izuku. Not when he was. He shouldn't be mumbling. His air supply dash, a voice Toshinori recognized as Cementos noted. Air supply? Where is he? Someone asked. A small crack rang through the room and a small green light the box up. The teacher's jaws dropped and Toshinori's frail heart stopped beating. There, Midoriya Izuku laid horizontally with maybe 3 inches from his nose to the top. The camera was placed by his feet, allowing the teachers to see his entire body shift uncomfortably. His all-might shirt was rumpled against his thin basketball shorts. He had no socks on or anything that could give him warmth. Toshinori could see his legs shake under the cold. Is he in it? Another hero trailed off. Midoriya picked up what looked like a tape recorder and hit the first button. Midoriya Izuku, a low distorted voice sounded out. I apologize we must speak like this, but know you, your abilities and, more importantly, your connections. The voice paused before continuing. My name does not matter now. What does is your survival, Midoriya Izuku. I want you to survive. I want you to live and become a great hero. If the sports festival was anything to go by, you would make a great hero dash. Then would you kidnap me? Midoriya mumbled as he brought the recorder closer to his ear. Toshinori could have laughed if it wasn't for the situation. This has nothing to do with you either. This has to do with pro heroes and your UA teachers. I won't say as the past does not matter. The future does. More importantly yours. Your situation right now is a test for them. How much do they really care about their students? Out of a student body of 2,000 children, how far will they go for just one? Will they fail and move on like nothing happened? Will your teachers bring up your death? Will UA even announce your disappearance? Or will the entire school just sweep you under the rug, forgotten and discarded? The voice shook as it continued. UA is not as great as the public says. This year only villain attacks have overrun your class only. How are students supposed to learn to protect others if their own teachers can't do the same for them? They say lead by example, but those teachers are no example to be followed. Pro heroes are supposed to save, protect and remember. They don't do that now. They forget students like you, Midoriya. The ones who try so hard and push themselves to just get the mere glance of a pro and look away. I believe that you would make a great hero. The question is, do they? You have 5 days in your situation as I have handled the air quantity. More than enough time for them to find you. However, you and the other dorm members of your school were drugged. You should have woken up not too long after I left you. Air supply doesn't depend on you either, but your so-called teachers of UA. I've said it once and I'll say it again. I hope you make it out alive, Midoriya Izuku. I hope you make a greater hero than the ones you know and worship. Goodbye, student. The recording ended. Every teacher in the room could feel the sinking panic in Midoriya as the information passed through. Suddenly, the camera picked up on Midoriya's chest going way too far up and way too far low. He's breathing too much and too deeply. He's going to use up his air supply. He's having a panic attack, Toshinori whispered, his chest getting tighter and tighter as he watched Midoriya's slow accent to panic. Izuku's panic. The boy kept breathing heavily for another 5 minutes before he stopped. Stopped moving. Stopped breathing. Stopped everything. Every jaw dropped. Toshinori couldn't move even if he wanted to. He stared red-eyed at the screen with his unmoving child. Did he just watch his student die? There was no way he was buried alive? Blood King asked breathlessly. Every teacher wanted to look away from the unmoving boy on the screen, but no one could. Toshinori stole a glance at Aizawa, who simply was as still as Midoriya. Toshinori felt something moving on his hand. He looked down at, it was just his shaking hand. Hand shaking so badly, he couldn't hold a glass of water. He felt Aizawa's eyes on his as he shook his hand and folded them under the table. Now wasn't the time for him to break. Not yet. He had to hold on. For who? If Midoriya was... I'm going to fast forward it a bit. He's still alive, but this next part could be difficult for some, Naomesa's voice rung out, snapping everyone back to the present. Please, leave the room if you need. But I believe you all need to see this. See the urgency in this situation. What kind of statement was that? Toshinori could clearly see the urgency. He could see it loud and clear right above his own son's unmoving body. Toshinori rolled his hands into fists. How dare Naomesa think that he doesn't understand how important this situation is? He was the one who ran in after Aizawa to carry his limp class out of a drugged building. He was the one who hauled an unconscious co-worker out of his own successor's empty bedroom. He of all people saw the urgency in. Play it, Aizawa demanded. Toshinori whipped his head at Aizawa. The detective nodded. Why am I crying? His voice rang through the green light coffin. Toshinori wanted to hit something by listening to Midoriya's soft and confused voice. Suddenly, Midoriya started to toss and turn. He started to cry and scream and bang against the coffin door. His voice shot through Toshinori like a bullet through glass. He's heard Midoriya cry, but never like this. Not this high-pitched, gut-wrenching panic and desperate-filled scream. Those cries weren't his typical sniffles but terrified, tormented back-of-throat yells that tore every one of his teachers to shreds. "Don't cry, Izuku. I'm your oldesh. Let me out." Midoriya cried out in anguish, completely oblivious to Toshinori's shattered heart. His screams ripping his vocal cords in pain. He kept tossing and turning, kicking and punching, clawing and crying. Midoriya let out another ear-piercing tortured scream as he desperately fought the metal walls. "Oh my God," someone said. Hands were coming up to mouths and tears fell from eyes. They couldn't do anything except watch their student bang and injure themselves against the metal cage. It was like watching a bird try to fly away in a too tiny of a cage. Pitiful and hopeless. A loud snap of a wrist sent an inhale through the teachers. The green glow of his quirk showed how little room the teen had. The camera kept shaking as the lightning boy kept fighting and kicking the walls of the coffin. "Don't hit anymore. You're done, Izuku. Please just breath. Breath, Izuku dash. Help me. Please, someone. Please." Midoriya screamed out. He kept smashing his limp wrist against the top of his coffin while his legs flailed around, desperate for some escape. "Stop it, my boy. Stop hurting yourself. Please. Let me out. Let me out. Please." The poor boy wheezed in anguish. Sweat mixed with tears dyed red with blood ran down his face. His knuckles were black, broken and bloody, while his knees looked the same way. A few of his toes looked out of place also. But none of that stopped him. Midoriya, the happy cheerful teen with too bright of a smile, laid tormented by the metal walls with nothing but his own distressed wails to fill the dead silence. Toshinori went deaf somewhere in the middle of it. He couldn't take it. Those screams. Those cries. Half was a mumbled mess, anyways. Toshinori subconsciously closed his eyes until he felt the teacher next to his stiffen even more. "Aizawa-sensei," Midoriya yelled. Pain, panic, sadness, desperation, all the emotions dripped from his voice. "Please help me. Help me. Help me. Let me out. Please, sensei. I'm sorry." The boy started to wedge himself between the walls, the flashes of lightning blinding the camera. All might, please. Save me." This from the sorry hit some rugged part of his voice. It was hoarse, dry, and painful. Yet here he was, using his oxygen, his lifetime, screaming out a name who couldn't help him. How could Toshinori let him go this? How did it ever come to this? Just 2 days ago they were running together, laughing together as they made their way around campus. Yet here was that same boy Toshinori was in charge of, crying out his name. He couldn't do this. He can't handle this. Midoriya. His boy needed him, but he couldn't go to help him. But. Why was he so pathetic? He couldn't help one student. Why was he so pathetic? "All might," Aizawa said quietly but sternly, taking the symbol of peace from his mind. It took everything Toshinori had to rip his eyes from watching his boy wither in fits of panic and anxiety. "Take a minute, if you need." "Why would I dash?" Then something hit his pants. Toshinori looked down as his dark trousers. Another hit. He squinted at the small circles of water splashing innocently on his pant leg. He took his bony, shaky fingers and touched his face. What? Why were they wet? Why would there be water on his dash? He was crying. Toshinori took a teary glance back up to Midoriya. Was that him screaming or Midoriya? Time, 8:14 a.m. "Aizawa-sensei," Midoriya's voice cried out. Aizawa stiffened. He had been keeping his emotions well under wraps this entire time. That's what 10+ years of underground heroics gets a person. He's had plenty of cases where people cry out for someone, anyone, to save them and he'd try. He'll save who he can. It'd be illogical to think everyone can be saved. But Midoriya Izuku's case is anything but logical. "Please help me. Help me. Help me. Let me out. Please, sensei. I'm sorry." He screamed, banging, and wiggling in his limited space. "Why are you apologizing, problem child? What have you ever done wrong that would make you apologize right now?" Aizawa thought. Maybe if his logical thinking was strong enough, He could hold up his crumbling stoic facade. Then no one could see how his heart was shredded by Midoriya's words. He'd sacrifice himself over and over again if that meant his kids could live another day. He'd do anything for them. So why couldn't he do anything now? All Might, please help me, Midoriya yelled, wedging himself between the walls. Aizawa never took his eyes off the screen, nor did he ever said anything. He'd never let something slip through his emotion-proof gate. He never does that ever, let alone in a room full of his coworkers and allies alike. However, listening to Midoriya, watching Midoriya, feeling his screams penetrate his very soul, Aizawa came mighty close. Midoriya's face was contorted in panic and fear. His cries never got quieter and his screams never softer. His movements only lost technique and soon form as his panic-fueled spasms continued. So much pain for someone so young. For some reason, Aizawa wondered if he felt any pain when he died. He shook his thoughts. He couldn't think like that. Midoriya wasn't dead. He was still alive. Savable. But Aizawa would save him. Rescue him. Answer his call for help. Like last time? He spared a glance at All Might, whose tears didn't match his shocked face. Aizawa nudged him. All Might, he whispered, trying to keep his voice steady. Take a moment, if you need. He may not be able to help Midoriya at the moment, but he could at least lend a hand to a fellow teacher. The number one hero faced him, fat, miserable, pitiful tears ran down his confused face. Why would I dash? Aizawa looked away for All Might's privacy. He was crying and didn't even know about it. He envied All Might's ability to openly show his emotions. He could easily do the same, but not here. Not with All Might secretly thanking Aizawa for not breaking under his problem child's screams. Not with said child was shaking with shivers and tears in front of them. Not when Midoriya Izuku is so close, yet so far. He turned back to the screen just as the man beside him screamed out so loudly, Aizawa jumped and went for his non-existent scarf. Yagi! The detective yelled, pausing the video just as Midoriya's foot was going to connect with the wall. Again. Aizawa looked down at the hunched-over number one hero. The man was full-on sobbing, his own wails matching the ones on the screen as he buried his face in his hands, eyes shut in pain. His mouth was hanging open, tears and saliva rhyming it while his breaths were rough, irregular and rigid. Aizawa didn't even know if he was trying to keep his cries in or not, but they were loud enough for everyone to look over and then away in condolences. His emotional yells were incoherent with the occasional, my boy or Izuku. Aizawa could sympathize with All Might. He knew what it felt for his entire world to come crashing down, but there was a time and a place for it. A conference room filled with a lead detective and 169 other pro-heroes trying to discuss a missing student was not the time. Nizu caught his eye somehow and nodded at the doors. Aizawa sent his own nod before gently grabbing All Might's arm and pulling him up. Excuse us, detective, he said, slowly and with a deep bow. Aizawa ignored the teacher's glances as he half-dragged the man out of the room. Once they were out of earshot of the conference room, Aizawa pulled him into an open classroom and quickly shut the door. All right, I get Midoriya is missing and that whatever connection you had is beyond a teacher and student, but right now, you cannot play father to the kid. You may not just be a teacher to Midoriya, but you are to 19 students. You are a staff member at this school and a pro-hero who needs to be both mentally and emotionally strong, Aizawa scolded. I'm not asking you to put that fake smile on, but you need to pull yourself together. Let loose and spill your emotions later. A pro is a pro, so start acting like one. Aizawa didn't even shoot him a glance as he walked out of the classroom, slamming the door shut so hard, it rattled the neighboring walls. He might have let a few drops of his own anger slip into his rant, but it didn't matter now. All that did was Midoriya. All Might was an adult. He didn't need to hold his hand. Aizawa walked back to the conference room, trying to dilute whatever anger was threatening to bubble over. His little rage slip seemed to flick a switch in him, making him angry at everyone. Anger at All Might. Anger at this kidnapper. Hell, even anger at Midoriya. Deep down in some logical part of his brain, he knew this anger was no one's fault but his. He was angry at everyone because he was angry at himself. For losing Midoriya, for letting another student gets kidnapped, for failing again, taking it out on others was just an excuse to not deal with it himself. Aizawa sat down alone at his table, sinking in a mix of fatigue, frustration, and guilt. All Might should be back soon, Aizawa said, keeping his emotions out of his voice. He'd be a hypocrite after his talk with All Might to blow up now. Sorry for the interruption. The detective blinked at him and nodded. I believe you all get the idea then. How long was it? The video? Someone asked. The detective's eyes studied Aizawa for a second too long for a passing glance before looking away. I'll get to that later. The suit and tie cleared his throat. Because Midoriya's captor had addressed you all, with the exception of All Might, I would like your help on this. Clearly, the captor had past differences with UA and its teachers, and by working with you all, using your quirks, ideas and planning, Midoriya will have a higher success with your assistance. What about school? I'm all for helping with this case, but tomorrow is Monday, a third-year teacher asked. The school will be shut down this coming week. I have contacted parents and such already, Nedza said. Tsukachi nodded. Also, please do not share any details of this case. This is not to go public. Of what the parents and public know, the Class 1A and teachers' dorms were accidentally gassed by an experiment gone wrong. Of the recovered, no one was injured. It was no student's fault. Vague as it is, it's for the safety of everyone. What about Midoriya? Don't the parents have the right to know about a missing student? The public could help us look dash. No, the detective interrupted bluntly. For the time being, too many dangers could come from the public knowing about Midoriya's disappearance. His kidnapper Aizawa cringed inside. Called out UA's teachers specifically. There is something only you can remember, as the video put it. If the public knew, they would be all over this school, and resources would be spent on publication versus Midoriya. Trust in UA would go down and parents may pull their child from the dorms. Having several UA students out of campus and unprotected could prompt this kidnapper to strike again if... Aizawa looked at the man. If what? The detective, bless his soul, stared right back into Aizawa's eyes. If Midoriya Izuku dies, his kidnapper might take another and do the same to them. This could start a serial kidnapping cycle around UA. If that happens, well, I don't need to explain why that would be bad. Several people gasped. Coward. That was all Aizawa could think of. Taking their issues out on innocent students then with the staff? Were they afraid that a head-to-head match left them as a crater in the ground? Were they that cowardly, they had to take a hostage to ensure business? That's stupid to pick one of Aizawa's students. What was the other reason why school is shut down? Midnight asked hesitantly. The detective looked solemn. He'd been hit question after question surrounding a student's, a child, disappearance while watching them torture themselves 6 feet under the ground, helpless to help. He leaned back over his computer and brought up another tab. Aizawa glanced back up on the screen and frowned. The screen looked like a picture, almost. Midoriya laid there still as ever. His green glow stick was at his feet now. Was this another video? The video you just watched of Midoriya was an edited version of this video. He pointed up at the projection. Through the green glow, Aizawa could see Midoriya's chest go up and down. Slower than usual. But it was going? How would an edited version of this video be possible if this video was still going in? It's a live stream, Aizawa whispered. The room froze as the detective continued. When we first opened the flash drive, the live stream had already started. We rewound it to watch from the beginning at 12 a.m. Saturday morning. The first video was just a snip of the live stream. How is he now? Another asked. He hasn't done anything else too extreme lately. He's been unconscious since his latest panic attack, Tsukachi read from a notebook. Did he watch Midoriya all that time? Record what times the kid woke up and cried? No wonder his eye bags are more prominent today. What does this have to do with school? The live stream has been playing since 12 a.m. Saturday morning, he said slowly. 1 out of the 5 days his kidnapper gave him has passed. With the excess breathing outside a calm state, Midoriya could have used up over a day's worth, limiting our time limit more. We still don't know exactly when Midoriya's air became limited, so there are many unknown factors, but details aside, If we don't find him soon, Midoriya Izuku will be dead midway through this week. Silence. Silence. Deafening. Silence. Aizawa narrowed his eyes. There is no way he is letting his student go that quickly. There is no way his class will be reduced by one. There is no way Aizawa Shota is letting Midoriya Izuku die. Then we work all night. This person said they have business with the UA staff. If we stay here together and go through UA's archives, we might dash. Yes, but the detective cut Hisashi off. UA staff will be working closely with a few other outside pro agencies. We will split up through quirks to go out and start searching the grounds. The security system wasn't tripped, nor were there any disruptions in other areas Friday night. Yesterday, we began interviews with potential informatics and started marking out possible sites. We'll alternate between field and desk jobs, especially those with suitable searching quirks and those closest to Midoriya. All the teachers are staying? One of the general education teachers asked. Just ones with Midoriya in their classes, Nedzu answered. Everyone else will conduct search and rescue points with the police and other heroes, rotating every 12 hours. I'm asking for a lot here in such a short time, so I thank you for cooperating. Swakuchi bowed the room. We'll break off and split up now. Thank you again, everyone. It'll be a long 4 days. The room returned the respect and jumped to action. Midoriya's class teachers all stayed in the room while others huddled with the officers to begin search points or general profiling. Aizawa was about to check up in all might when someone called his name. Aizawa. He turned to see the detective standing right behind him with Nizu on his shoulder. Tsukachi? He's known the detective for some time. They've worked on plenty of cases together to the point where they both know each other's investigation styles. Aizawa appreciated the man's straight-to-business bluntness, skipping over the typical diabetic sugar-coating and getting to what matters. He sighed deeply at Aizawa. I'm going to be blunt here, Eraser. You're off this case. You too close to Midoriya, as is All Might. It's a time-sensitive case that needs a clear mind. Aizawa's eyebrows disappeared into his hair. Excuse me, Dash. Aizawa, Nizu said, solemnly. His black eyes bared down at his own. You are far too emotionally attached to this case. It would lead to non-existent conclusions, illogical reasoning, and risky behavior. You know just as much as anyone why you are off this case. I'm an underground hero, Principal, Aizawa stated calmly. He was not calm. And both Tsukachi and Nedzu knew it. What better person to work on this than Dash? You were the one who found Midoriya, Nedzu interrupted. Automatically, that puts you in a different headspace than the other teachers. Second, you are 1A's homeroom teacher. Underground hero or not, you still have a duty to the other students. At times, doing the most for the ones you love is doing nothing at all. It is the true test of heroics. Midoriya has 168 other UA heroes behind him along with an entire police force while your other 19 students have only each other. Be there for them. Your student will be taken care of. Aizawa understood where Nizu was coming from, but he was still a hero. A teacher, as he said. His student needed him and Aizawa needed to be there. I still believe Dash. Don't forget, Aizawa, the little rat interrupted again, jumping from the detective's shoulder. The principal looked up at the confused hero with a gentle smile. He called for you first? Time, 8:26 a.m. Hey, Uraraka, Midoriya said with a nervous smile. He mentally slapped himself for stuttering as he walked towards the brown-haired girl. It was a nice day out. Not too cold but not too hot either. The sun was bright and the breeze was gentle, kissing everyone's cheeks with its red touch. Hey, Deku, she said back brightly, waving at Midoriya. She was already at the meeting spot after school where she, him, Ida and Todoroki would walk back to the dorms together. The meeting spot was just an old street lamp outside the gates. It wasn't anything special to them, but it was to Midoriya. It was a reminder of how good of friends he had. How much they all meant to him and how much he meant to them. He smiled as she and Ida walked up to him. Hello, Midoriya. Ida said loudly, his hand poking his glasses. How was your day? Tired but good now. I'm glad it's Saturday tomorrow, though, Midoriya said, readjusting his backpack straps. He looked around for the last member of their group. How was yours? Full of important education and daily motivation. He exclaimed. Uraraka giggled as she nodded. Same here, Ida, she said, a breeze twirling her hair in the wind. Midoriya tilted his head slightly. Maybe it was the way the sun reflected off his shiny but silky smooth hair or the way her eyes crinkled as she tittered at Ida, but Uraraka looked, in simple terms, beautiful at that moment. She looked beautiful and was beautiful in more ways than just one. Her blazer was rolled up at the arms a few knots, showing off the scars she got from Gunhead's internship and Mirako's work-study. It was a testament to how tough and driven she was. She was never afraid to show them off either. Uraraka would tell him how they matched whenever he wore a short-sleeve shirt or when he was doing dinner's dishes. Her determination was simply beautiful. Her smile too. Midoriya couldn't think of any words other than beautiful. Exquisite? Stunning? Breathtaking? Now that he thought about it, he couldn't think of any words that could describe her and do justice. Some words like badass, kind, and simply cool only did half the work. Nothing in Midoriya's mind could come close to matching her smile, her bubbly aura, her beauty, her skills, her heroics, her strength. He loved it all. What are you staring at, Midoriya? Someone said in his ear. 1, 2, 3. Todoroki. And no one. Why would I be looking at someone? I mean, something, Midoriya quickly fixed with a nervous laugh. Not someone. Why would I want to look at people? What makes you think that I would be looking at something anyways? Unless citizen or might website or something, I typically don't look at anything goranyon cause it would be weird and I'm not weird. Todoroki eyed Midoriya and then followed his original line of sight. Uraraka? Huh. The girl in question broke off her conversation with Ida and looked at the two boys. Oh hey Todoroki. You need something? Why was Midoriya looking at you? The peppermint teen asked, curiously tilting his head. Todoroki. Midoriya interrupted, waving his hands in front of him. It's not like that, Uraraka. I would never look at you. He said with a kind smile, his cheeks bright red. That is until he realized what he said. No. I mean I wouldn't stare at you. Not that I was saying I was staring. Todoroki is just doing something like being, horrible, wingman. He trailed off quietly, looking away. What does Hawks have to do with this? Todoroki asked, confused. His blunt analysis would be the end of Midoriya. You going on another hero spiel, Midoriya? Ida asked, taking the lead for the walk. The three followed closely behind as they made their way back to the dorms. And no, Midoriya took a breath. Never mind. Do you guys have anything planned for the weekend? Sleep? Uraraka said with a yawn. Meeting with my brother. Training. What's your training for this weekend? Midoriya asked, glad to talk about something else. Is it with your father or just on your own? Swimming. It's a good workout apparently and UA has a massive pool for it. It's a bit cool, but nothing I can't help with, Todoroki said, holding a small flame in his hand then quickly extinguishing it. I'm doing it on my own. Fire and water normally don't mix. Ooh, can I join you? Uraraka asked excitedly. I've been trying to control the amount of gravity an object or a person has lately. I don't have great control over it, though. It always fluctuates when I use it. I could do quirk resistance training with you in the pool? See if I can hold a floatable object under while the water pushes them to the top? Sure, Todoroki shrugged. Midoriya, would you like you to want to come? Why yeah? He yelled too quickly. What did he just say yeah to? Swimming? Would he wear a shirt? He didn't want to make anyone uncomfortable by not wearing one. Plus, what would Uraraka think? Would she think that he was trying to show off? He wasn't. Summer was different because it was hot out, but it was cooler now. Would she think he was one of those player types? He didn't want her to misinterpret him. He wasn't wearing a shirt for her. At least, not just for her. The added drag would help with his resistance in swimming, but what shirt would wear? Are you coming? Uraraka asked, running up next to Ida. Where you guys going? Someone asked behind them. The group turned towards a smiling Kirishima dragging an irritated Bakugo towards them. The pool. Todoroki, Deku, and I are going to go swimming and do some quirk training later on. Want to join? Uraraka asked cheerfully. Sometimes her smile could rival Midoriya's and to literally anyone that was saying something. Oh, like the races we had in summer? That was fun. Bogo and all dash. PSH, I ain't going anywhere near Deku, Bakugo scoffed, shaking Kirishima from his blazer. He's bad enough on land. Hey, man dash, Kirishima started again before getting interrupted. Oh, or is it because he's a faster swimmer? Yurikaka egged him on with a daring smirk. She took a confident step forward so she was toe in toe with the explosive boy, her head barely reaching his chin. Or because he would have beaten you at the last swimming contest? Ha ha ha, Uraraka, Midoriya nervously laughed. He wedged himself between the two, silently wishing Bakugo wouldn't kill him, then her, then him again. Keikaken always faster in the water. I don't even float. Get out, Deku, he said, pushing Midoriya out of the way. He looked down at Uraraka, who didn't flinch under his intense red-eye gaze. You're on round cheeks. Keikaken dashed. Nah, Deku used his quirk again and easily beat you, Uraraka said nonchalantly. She ignored the teen's explosive hands and the redhead's hardened arms holding him back. How about whoever can hold their breath the longest wins? Wins what? Todoroki asked, his interest piqued. Ida too stopped walking as he noticed the group not following. A kiss on the cheek, Uraraka yelled. Todoroki, Ida and Kirishima's eyebrows disappeared into their hair while Deku immediately turned red and quickly looked away. Even Bakugo had some wind-burnt cheeks. Or brownies. Sato and I will make some for the winner, she said, noticing the boy's reaction. He scoffed at the first offer. Deal, but if I win, I don't want no bacteria-filled lips on my face. No, if I win, Deku plays against Kirishima and me in slap pong. He smiled to himself in evil contentment as he continued. With quirks. Midoriya didn't really know what slap pong was but heard it was a more painful version of table tennis. He was alright with normal tennis, so slap pong shouldn't be too difficult, right? Deal, Uraraka said, grabbing onto Bakugo's hand. Hey, why are your hands so soft? Do you moisturize? I thought they'd be rougher like Deku's or even Kirishima's dash. Get off me, he yelled quickly, the wind burn on his cheeks getting a bit redder. He wiggled his hand from Uraraka's before facing Midoriya. Cool. 6 o'clock. Be there. I reserved it for 5 o'clock, Todoroki interjected. Go, refrigerate yourself, half and half, Bakugo yelled, grabbing Kirishima and walking off. Let's do our best then? Midoriya yelled out after him. Bakugo threw him the finger in response. At least he heard me, he whispered awkwardly. He faced his friends again. Uraraka took a step closer to Midoriya. Sorry for making that deal, but I know you can beat Bakugo. I believe in you, Uraraka said, throwing her fist into the air, narrowly missing Ida's glasses. Thanks, Uraraka, Midoriya said sheepishly. Even if he didn't make the deal, he would still try his best. Go beyond. Plus ultra. The four walked back to the dorms with Ida's scoldings on forcing others into bets and such filling the background noise. Ida left for Hosu when they got back while Todoroki and Midoriya both got changed into their swimsuits. Are you wearing a shirt? Midoriya asked, quietly looking around the empty common room. Todoroki was wearing a long-sleeve shirt and holding a pair of sandals and a towel. He raised an eyebrow at the fully clothed Midoriya. He was wearing his trunks but with a short-sleeve shirt and a jacket. Oh, if I use my fire, my shirt will burn. I already lost 5 shirts and 3 school uniforms, he said sadly. Are you? Probably. It might get, cold, Midoriya said, lying horribly. Maybe he'll ask All Might on how to properly lie without being an awkward mess of obviousness. I already said I can warm the pool, he said, refolding his white towel. And no, cold swimming helps with breathing control, and if we go to the deeper end, it gets cooler over there. Warm water doesn't go that far down, you know? He said gawky, not meeting Todoroki's eye. Man, he really needs lying lessons. I see. Are you ready then? Todoroki said, standing up. Yeah. The two already got permission from Aizawa-sensei to use the lap pool and notified him of the others that were coming. When they all arrived, however, Uraraka, Mina, Hagurake, Momo and Azui were already there, as was Kirishima, Kaminari, Shiro, and Bakugo. Well, what Aizawa-sensei doesn't know will kick them all into week-long detention, but that's future Midoriya's problem. You ready, Deku? Bakugo asked tauntingly. The teen was already dressed in black swimming trunks and orange tie around his waist. He was holding two 20-pound weights while standing at the pool's edge. Kaminari and Kirishima were talking next to him. Don't you want to swim or something first, man? Get your lungs warmed up? Or just wait till the water warms up? Our human heater just arrived after all, Kirishima said, nudging Bakugo and pointing at Todoroki. They all turned to see Todoroki knee-deep the water with all the girls seeping in the literal man-made jacuzzi. Kaminari mumbled something about lucky Todoroki while Midoriya dropped his stuff off on a bench. He walked over to the trio, ready and somewhat excited. Challenging Bakugo in an innocent contest was always fun to Midoriya. It reminded him of when they were both quirkless younglings who would race each other to their houses or eat ice cream the fastest or even sleep in the longest. Back when they were best friends. It may not be like old times, but the way Bakugo treats Midoriya now is different. He's still blunt, rude, and offensive to Midoriya, and really everyone, but not in a degrading way. Their discussions are banters, not arguments. His hits aren't aimed to maim and his comments rarely hold as much venom as they used to. Times aren't the same. Somehow they're better. A step closer to an actual friendship between rivals. Midoriya internally smiled at the thought. Cold water will constrict breathing, making the weaker one drop out first. Right, Deku? Bakugo said, throwing the weight at Midoriya, who caught it easily. Damn, already starting with the trash talk. Good luck, man, Kaminari said, flashing a grin at Midoriya. The two left as Midoriya confidently nodded at the blonde. If he was going up against Bakugo in any sort of competition, he knew the other would bring nothing but his best. Midoriya would have to do the same. His eyes narrowed in determination as the two stepped up the middle of the lap pool where the bottom was 10 or so feet deep. You got this, Deku, Uraraka said, appearing out of nowhere and slapping a hand on his back. Suddenly his entire chest felt heavy. Heavy. He shook the feeling off and readjusted the weight in his hands. Ready, Momo called out, holding out the stopwatch she made for all eyes to see. All the girls plus Kaminari and Shiro were sitting in the jacuzzi area of the lap pool with Todoroki awkwardly standing in the middle. Get set. Go. The two jumped into the pool, sinking even quicker with the weights. Eyeing each other at the two sat on the bottom of the pool. They both resumed Buddha-like positions, the weights holding their legs down. Red eyes bared at green ones in the one-sided staring contest which Midoriya just ignored. The seconds got longer as the two sat there. It was oddly peaceful. Kaken wasn't exploding at Midoriya and Midoriya wasn't kicking Kaken. The simple silence was somewhat comforting to him. Something splashed next to Midoriya with the muffled sounds of laughter. He looked behind him to see Todoroki disheveled in the water with Kaminari's hand holding on to him for dear life. Another set of hands was grabbing at Kaminari as Shiro wrestled Kaminari from above. Midoriya was about to warn them that they were still in the shallower end when Kaminari's foot accidentally kicked Todoroki's chin, his head hitting hard against the shallow pool. Midoriya was about to swim over but stopped as a wave of ice-cold water hit him. He looked back over at Bakugo, who finally shut his eyes from the staring contest. Shiro and Kaminari would help Todoroki out of the pool, so he'd alert Bakugo. Whatever happened, the two needed to get out and get help. He walked over to Bakugo as the water was getting colder and colder. His toes starting to get tingly and his head a bit woozy from the temperature drop. He looked up when the entire surface of the water was covered in a thin layer of ice. Someone grabbed Midoriya's shoulder. It was Bakugo, his red eyes wide and alarmed. Swim up, he yelled, mumbled due to the water. Bakugo dropped his weight and started to swim to the deep end where the ice hasn't reached yet. Midoriya was quick to follow. As he started to swim, however, something kept dragging him down, closer and closer to the pool's floor. Soon he couldn't even kick off the ground. Midoriya tried to jump off and swim upwards just for something to pull him right back down, deeper and deeper in the pool's depth. Every jump made it harder for him to move and wasted his energy. His paddles became steps as the pull firmly kept him on the ground, pushing him harder and harder into the floor. A quick glance at the UA's underwater logo told him he was mere inches from the deepest part of the pool, while another glance at the surface where the light was getting dimmer and dimmer said the ice was thickening. Bakugo was almost to the surface too, not even noticing Midoriya not behind him. "Kakin!" he yelled, running out of air. He watched as his oxygen-filled bubbles escaped from his lungs and floated away, his life source disappearing before his frozen eyes. Kachin! The boy in question turned at the marbled sound and quickly started to swim towards him when someone jumped in, breaking the ice with their hardened body with a loud splash. They grabbed onto a fighting Bakugo and threw him to the surface. Kirishima didn't see Midoriya at the bottom of the 17-foot-deep pool, its darkness hiding him from the surface. Midoriya watched in horror as the water got darker and darker as Todoroki's ice got thicker and thicker. He was feeling dizzy, light-headed, nauseous. He was running out of air. He grabbed at his throat and desperately tried to swim away. One for all couldn't lift his legs, which were kneeling on the rough ground. He didn't have any more air. No more oxygen. He was going to drown. Die. He couldn't breathe. He threw off his shirt in hopes that it would alleviate his sinking. Surprisingly, it did. He felt lighter than ever but colder than before. No, it wasn't even cold anymore. It was freezing, paralyzing, bitterly icy. The water's temperature was piercing his every move like frozen pins and needles as he swam towards the ice-covered surface. He couldn't feel his toes and his legs were numb. His fingers would barely function and his eyes were burning from the freezing water. His teeth chattering so hard, he could have broken a tooth while his lungs were squeezing and contracting too fast for the rest of his body to keep up with. The frosty fangs of the water bit deep into Midoriya's skin, sucking out any sort of warmth he had. The only sound he could hear was the deafening pumps of the frigid blood in his ears. Hey! He yelled at the dense ice, pounding at the 4-foot-deep ice. He tried to power up one for all, but his head couldn't focus enough to use it. He couldn't even feel his limbs to throw a punch or kick. Midoriya couldn't breathe. His vision started to blacken as he fought as hard as he could against the ice. He banged his useless legs and arms against the ice in hopes anyone, would hear him. "Help!" his voiceless voice said. Was he thinking that or saying it? The pressure was building in his head, making his mind want to explode. He couldn't breathe. There was no more air to breathe in and no room to breathe out. He was drowning. 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 He was cold and drowning. Tired and drowning. Alive and drowning. The rapidly growing ice, now 5 feet deep, was only pushing him further and further down back towards the ground. Back into the shadows of the living. No help. Help me. Please. Someone. I am drowning. Help me. Save me. Rescue me. This couldn't be the end. He didn't want to drown. Not here. Not with his friends and his family above him. He wanted to be with them. He couldn't drown. Yet, he could drown. He will drown. He'll die at the bottom of this pool. He could die. He will die. If only someone came. If only someone would. There was one last thought before his consciousness faded. One last thought before he took his fatal inhale of water. One last thought before Midoriya Izuku drowned in a sea of cold, lonely darkness, 6 feet under the ice. Let me out. Time, 7:04 a.m. Toshinori took a breath. After Aizawa slammed the door behind him, he seemed to have woken up, or at least, as he said, get a grip. He calmed down, regained control, shook out his shaking hands as he composed himself. It may have taken 10 minutes, but he was all right now. Or, as all right as one can be in his situation. Toshinori shook off the thought as he walked through the busy hallway. Busy? Toshinori looked at the heroes' faces as they all shuffled past him in the tight hallway. All wore the same tired, horrified, and sympathetic looks. Everyone's shoulders were hunched and auras a bit darker. Toshinori was about to tap someone on the shoulder when someone called out his name. Yagi, Naomasa called out. Toshinori nodded at the man as he gently worked his way to the now empty conference room, his shoulder accidentally hitting the last person in the room. Sorry, Aizawa, Toshinori said, his voice still raspy from the previous minutes. Aizawa just grunted, shoving his hands deeper into his pockets and walking off. Toshinori turned back to his detective friend. What did I miss? He looked up at the screen which had a sleeping Midoriya on it. His breath steadily went up and down, albeit a bit quicker and irregular than usual, but still, he was breathing. I'll cut to it, Yagi, the detective said bluntly. He took a breath before starting. It's a live stream. Midoriya has 4, maybe 3.5 more days of air. The police and other pro-heroes will be returning to UA in a couple of minutes to start the investigation. You and Aizawa are off this case, Naomasa said straightly. His ability to compartmentalize in the most serious situations won his detective title. To watch a child wither in pain 6 feet under the ground and keep a calm face is no easy feat, yet here a man who did it for a full day stood, eyes straight, serious and stoic. Toshinori's heart stuttered at his words. 3 days? That's all his boy had? And he couldn't do anything? He knew that it was coming. He knew that being buried alive meant a limited air supply. He knew what was to come for Midoriya, but it didn't feel real. Toshinori shook aside his thoughts. Midoriya needed him, and he would be there in any way he could, even if he wasn't directly helping him. I understand, he said softly. You understand? Naomasa asked, surprised. Yes. I'm too close to Midoriya to think of this case with a logical mind. Aizawa no doubt is the same, no matter how much logical thinking he says he has, Toshinori said quietly. There would be no way the detective would let him in this case. Toshinori was exempted from the captor's threat, so he wouldn't remember anything helpful. His quirk, or lack thereof, wouldn't do anything to physically aid Midoriya, and he wasn't trained or experienced enough as the police in kidnapping cases to help with the search. Naomasa eyed him before nodding. Good. I have another job for you too then. Toshinori quirked a brow. Naomasa looked back to the projector. The live stream needs to be watched, he said slowly. One of my officers was on first watch but had to take a break. I took over from there, noting times and reactions for the police records and medical needs. It needs to be logged. I suggest you and Aizawa do it, but in shifts. No one person could do this alone, especially when he's awake. Toshinori looked at his friend, concerned. You did it though? I suggest to go find Aizawa and talk to your students. They need to know what's happening. I know, Yagi said. Thank you for watching over my boy, Naomasa. The detective nodded, turning to the doorway. I'm sorry, Yagi. The man whispered so softly, so quietly, so solemnly, Toshinori could have cracked again. Those 3 words just mocking him with the reality that is now. The situation was far too familiar to his liking. His only family was on the verge of death again, and Toshinori could do nothing but watch, again. He took a breath as he looked up at the screen. What are you dreaming about, my boy? He asked aloud, not even trying to hide his sadness in his voice. He watched Midoriya's face contort in discomfort and panic before reading the clock and turning to go find Aizawa. Naomasa was right, the students needed to know what was happening. 7 a.m. He was a fool to think that it'd be easy finding an underground hero. It's been 10 minutes of Toshinori walking up and down floor after floor trying to find the hero when the next best thing popped up. Present, Mike? Toshinori said, his voice carrying down the hall to the other blonde hero just about to enter the archive room. All Might, what do you need? Present Mike, like the others, wasn't dressed in his hero costume and instead sported his normal civilian attire. Toshinori eyed the man in front of him. From one flashy hero to another, the difference between his hero and civilian persona was a drastic one. From the tired eyes to the ponytailed hair to the normal blue shirt, this wasn't Present Mike. This was Yamada Hisashi. Have you seen Aizawa? I've been looking for him, Toshinori said, meeting the man halfway. Last I saw him, he was in the restroom. He looked at his watch. 5 minutes ago? Check his classroom or the lounge. He'd be there. Thank you, Yamada, Toshinori said with a head bow. Yamada's green eyes softened at the use of his real name. It's nothing, All Might. You know, you and Eraser are a lot more alike than you think. He and Aizawa were probably polar opposites on everything. From heroics to teaching methods to personality, they were on complete opposite sides of everything. I don't think we have much in common. Neither did me nor Midnight, but here the three of us are, teaching at our alma mater. You went to UA with him? Toshinori asked. Now that he thinks about it, they both seemed like good old friends and Aizawa didn't seem the type to befriend random acquaintances. He's also friendly with Midnight, who he thought was around Aizawa's age. Honestly, he didn't even know how old any of his coworkers were, or young for that matter. Yes. We were the dumb bingos of 2A, Yamada laughed. When we graduated, he went underground while I stayed in the light. Somehow, Nem and I dragged the sleeping bag he calls home to UA, and here we are, 5 years later. Yamada said with a smirk. How long have you been teaching here? Toshinori asked, thinking back on the kidnapper's message. The entire staff knows them. Or at least should. So somewhere between this year and the newest teacher, outside of himself, something must have happened where everyone met this person. An event that UA hosted? A past teacher's resignation, an attack that involved every teacher here? Surely, some kind of attack that included UA and its teachers All Might would have known about. The USJ invasion spread quicker than wildfire through both the school, the press, and Japan entirely. Unless it was kept under tight wraps like his first fight with All for One? Does UA have that kind of power though? Why was he in the dark about an attack on UA, his alma mater and now workplace? And why would Nizu want something like that kept quiet? Too many questions. And not enough answers. Toshinori sighed. He was grasping at straws. He leapt at any sort of connection, even the ones that may not even exist, the exact reason why Naomasa kicked him off the case. The man knew how he would react before Toshinori himself knew. He was just desperate for anything. Any type of answer. Truth or lie. He just wanted something. 6 years, Yamada answered, breaking Toshinori from his so-like Midoriya thoughts. UA is protective over its teachers and students, and Nizu rarely hires a new teacher. But exceptions must be made for Japan's #1. He smiled. Hope you find a racer, then. Thank you, Yamada. Both heroes nodded and parted ways. Toshinori walked down to 1A's room when the man himself popped out of the restrooms, almost body-slamming into the retired hero. Oh, sorry, Toshinori apologized, taking a step back. I was looking for you. Aizawa jumped ever so slightly before glancing at Toshinori. His old eyes didn't miss the way Aizawa hid his left hand behind his back. Is something wrong with your hand? Toshinori asked. He could have sworn to see some bruised knuckles. No, Aizawa said, brushing past him. He hid his hand in his sleeve as he walked down the hall. I'm fine. Toshinori got a sudden montage of every time Midoriya said the exact thing and was not okay. Did you hurt it? He asked, following Aizawa to wherever. No. Liar. If it's bleeding, you should clean it. It may get an infection or not heal correctly. I've treated a bleeding before, All Might. Do you need recovery, girl? No. A hospital? No. Help. With your hand? No. Toshinori sighed as Aizawa dipped into a hallway. He opened the door and walked inside, letting the door hit All Might behind him. Aizawa, do you need something else, All Might? Or are you my personal nurse now? Aizawa interrupted bitterly, sitting down at his desk. The desk? Toshinori looked around the room. Large rows of desks filled with computer monitors, half-drunken coffees, and mountains of ungraded worksheets filled the spacious room while lesson plans, class schedules, and facility reservations littered the tables. Toshinori's own jacket sat thrown over his chair while a box of old donuts from Friday laid stale on the counter. They were in the teacher's lounge. Sorry, Aizawa mumbled quietly. It's been a stressful morning. Oh, it's fine. Toshinori awkwardly stood there. He could go to his desk and talk, but he needed Aizawa to go to the hospital for more reasons than just one. Tsukachi talked with me after the meeting. He told you he wants us both off the case? Aizawa rummaged through his bottom drawers and brought out a small first aid kit. Yes, but there is another job he would like us to do. That stopped him. What? For the first time in the 7-minute meet, greet, and walk, Aizawa looked at Toshinori. He gazed at the man in front of him. Toshinori could tell Aizawa was exhausted, despite having 30+ hours of sleep. From the slower movement to the slight jumpiness, he could see the mental stress finally taking its physical toll on the man. Yet there was still that spark of energy behind all that fatigue. Determination. Desperation. Maybe Mike wasn't that wrong. He wants us to record the live stream. Midoriya's routine needs to be tracked for legal and medical records. Toshinori started. We should take shifts. Tsukachi's first officer couldn't do it after Izuka dash. 2 pro heroes will stand a lot longer than a new police recruit, Aizawa interrupted. I'll take the first shift. We both need to go to the hospital. Warn and inform the students. Nizu wants them moved back into the dorms as quickly as possible. Toshinori's mouth opened, then closed with a smile. Even after knowing he'll spend 12 straight hours watching one of his students sleep or freak in a coffin buried somewhere alone, he never forgets his other students. My thoughts exactly, Aizawa. Aizawa huffed, pouring a bottle of alcohol into a cup. He grabbed a few cotton balls and started cleaning the hand he was hiding from Toshinori, wincing when he hit a tender spot. The hand didn't look bad. Just a little beat up. Like a fist fight with a wall. Time and a place, huh, Aizawa? Aizawa threw the cotton ball into the trash and got out some medical tape and small scissors. He tried to find the tapes beginning when the entire thing dropped and rolled away. Let me? Toshinori offered, sitting at present Mick's surprisingly organized desk. Aizawa looked at Toshinori, borderline offended. He grabbed the runaway roll. I know how to patch myself up. It doesn't mean you have to. I've had my fair share of injuries that need personal care, Toshinori said, thinking about his left side. Aizawa studied him, narrowing his eyes and slowly holding out his hand to Toshinori. Toshinori didn't miss a beat as he unrolled a thing of black tape and wrapped his knuckles and wrist in place, careful to not tussle his hand more than need be. So you are my personal nurse now? When you have young Midoriya as a student, one must be well versed in the medical field. Toshinori chuckled, thinking back all the training he did with the boy. This was almost second nature. During training sessions, when Midoriya would go too far than his body would accept, his hands be bruised from hitting the punching bag too many times. Toshinori would sit the sweaty boy down and tend to his injuries. Other times, during the summer prior to UA, heavier pieces of trash would slip from his hands and land on his foot or fingers. For a student who cries during a baby bird hatching, he sure could handle pain. Never during those times did he shed a tear. He never cried at the USJ when 3 of his 4 limbs were broken like twigs. He never cried at his battle match with young Todoroki at the sports festival. He never cried at his injuries with Stain. He never cried during his encounter with Muscular. He wailed. Sobbed in fear and panic. Shouted. Yelled. Screamed a scream that would haunt Toshinori for the rest of his days. Apologized. Pleaded, desperate for someone, anyone, to rescue him. After all Midoriya's villain encounters, the one that gets him is the one neither Toshinori nor Midoriya could fight. Toshinori finished up the rap, his head drooping to the spiraling thoughts of what. Aizawa accidentally nudged his chair as he got up. Let's go. What? The students need us, all might. Midoriya is taken care of, Aizawa said, slowly. He faced Toshinori. There is nothing we can do right now for him now. Toshinori sighed. He was right. Naomasa was right. He picked himself out of the chair and followed Aizawa out the door. All might? Aizawa-sensei? Kirishima asked, sitting on the lounge chair. His hair was de-spiked and in a high ponytail, courtesy of one Ishido Mina who was sitting next to him. Unlike the hour ago, all 19 students were awake. Aoyama and Mineta were in private rooms getting checkups from Recovery Girl, but they were all awake. Okay. What you doing here? Siro asked, playing cards on the floor with a very tired look. Sato. The doctors said some may feel side effects longer than others. Is everyone here? Aizawa asked, his voice low and serious. Siro and Kirishima must have sensed the change in tone as they all stiffened up. Oh. Todoroki, Ida, and Uraraka are in the cafeteria with Momo, but everyone else is here, Ojiro said seriously, reading the sudden change in atmosphere. Young Azui, would you please go gather them? There is some information we must share with you all, Toshinori said softly. His somber voice was supposed to ease and calm the heightening students, not add fuel to their anxious embers, Yet every student looked even more nervous now than before. "Yes, sir," she said before. Exiting the room, Toshinori and Aizawa were standing by the doorway while the students subconsciously circled around them. Shuji raised one of his appendages. "Should we wait for Aoyama and Mineta? I heard they both woke up. Midoriya should be waking any time now then too?" Toshinori's heart clenched. "Ashido," Aizawa called out. The girl was sitting on the couch across from the two standing heroes with Jiro next to her. Jiro looked saddened, as did Ashido. Did Aizawa already tell those two? The pink girl shook her head. "Not yet," the pink one said quietly. "How are the three?" "I heard Midoriya, Aoyama and Mineta got drugged the most," Kaminari asked. Knowing Mineta though, he's probably oogling at the nurses or something, he said with a snicker, trying to lighten the heavy mood. Nobody but the silent set. "Mineta and Aoyama are awake. They are getting a private checkup with Recovery Girl but will be fine," Aizawa answered in his normal tired tone. To some, his stoic manner calmed them. It was the same voice he used in class. "What about Midoriya?" "We should wait until the others get back," Toshinori said. The wave of nerves washed over every student like a tidal wave. Is he still asleep? Or is he hurt? What happened to Dash? Where's Deku? Everyone, including Aizawa and Toshinori, looked at the new voice. Bakugu's wide red eyes and stiff, almost nervous posture told the two pros he already figured it out. Toshinori should give him credit. After all, saying one student's dorm neighbors woke up from a double dose of a sleeping drug but not the person in between them would allow anyone to figure out what was really happening. Young Bakugo Dash. "Aizawa-sensei? All Might-sensei? What are you going here?" Uraraka's cheery voice asked, walking next to Azui. The automatic doors opened for the missing students. "Are we free to go now?" "Sensei, how are the others?" Ida asked. Todoroki just nodded with his question. "How's Midoriya, Aoyama and Mineta?" Aizawa didn't answer them. "Come in the room," he said. "I'm not going to sugarcoat this. Midoriya has been kidnapped," Aizawa said, looking directly at his students. "Friday night, he was taken. The teachers in 1A's dorm were drugged with a narcotic gas. Your dorms had a double dosage from the teachers, which is why you woke up later. The second floor had a triple dosage in Midoriya's room, affecting Aoyama and Mineta more. Midoriya has been missing since. The police, teachers, and several agencies are working on the case. No classes for the rest of the week." It got cold. Very cold. It killed Toshinori to see the normally rambunctious class so quiet. So still. Like statues. No one moved. No one breathed. It was if anyone made any movement, life would overturn this pause in time and the truth would actually be the truth. That one of their own was gone. They looked desperate. Desperate for Aizawa to tell the punchline. Desperate to wake up from this horrible nightmare. Desperate to get Midoriya back. Yet both Aizawa and Toshinori were as desperate as they were. Every eye was dead set on Aizawa and Tohinori, except one. Time, 10:17 a.m. "What?" someone said quietly, the shock still making its way through the room. "What do you mean Midoriya's gone? Was it the League of Villains? Is he okay? Who took him? How's the rest of the students? Is he safe? Is anyone else missing? How did they get him? Why could no one hear him? Are we safe?" Koda whispered in the back. Aizawa tuned out all questions except that one. He looked right at Koda. Despite him being close to 6 feet 0 inches, the kid looked like exactly what he was, a kid. His hands were curled together and clutched closely to his chest. His head was down, but his eyes never left Aizawa's. The kid was scared. They all were. Aizawa couldn't do anything for Midoriya's recuse right now. But he could be here for the students. For his own kids. Yes. "I don't make promises I can't keep, but I will never let another one of you get hurt under my protection. Unless I die, no one will ever touch any of you," Aizawa reassured. Koda nodded a small nod. There was another silence. This one more subdued than the one before. "What must you and All Might Sensei do?" "What will we do?" Kirishima asked, his voice also quiet. "Private matters with our lead detective," Aizawa answered. "None of you will be alone, however. One of us will always be here. he said, looking at All Might next to him. We'll get him back, right? If the teachers need help or the police, we can all use our quirks to find him. Momo could make another tracker or some kind of locator. We'll all fight whoever took Midoriya too. We have our provincial license too, so we can help the others. Just like last time. No, Yoroyozu interrupted. All eyes, including Aizawa's, were on the class vice president whose head was lowered. Last time was foolish. We were just stupid kids who thought we could do more than we knew. Momo-Azui started. Last time, we were almost killed. If it wasn't for Midoriya's geniuses or Todoroki and Ida's quirks, we would have died, Yoroyozu said. It was rare to see her speak this bluntly. It was the truth, but to openly state it in such a way was so unlike the creation hero. Last time, Kaminari retorted. If we weren't there, All Might may have not won. You should know better than anyone. Bakugo could have died. You were his escape. You rescued him. And Midoriya could die now too. Yoroyozu yelled, looking up at the electric boy. Don't you understand? This isn't the League of Villains. This is a completely new and unknown force. Whoever took Midoriya could want anything. Information? His quirk? His life? He was targeted for a reason. They were willing to waltz into a school of pro-heroes, drug Japan's most famous institution, and sneak into a dorm room of heroes in training just to take one person. They were willing to risk everything to take Midoriya. If we were to go in irresponsibly, we could screw everything up. We could die. Pros could die. Midoriya could die. For once, we all need to let the others handle this. She took a breath to compose herself. You weren't there, Kaminari. Bakugo's life was in our hands. It was only luck and Midoriya that he made it out all right. Midoriya wouldn't want us to go anyway. We would only be in the way, she finished quietly. Kaminari was quiet before apologizing. I'm sorry, Momo. No, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have shouted at you, she said, bowing. Nah, it was the truth though, Kaminari said. I was just speaking from emotions. I can never find a balance between heart and logic, can I? Don't say that, Kaminari. You'll make an excellent hero. We all will, Yoroyozu said, looking at the blank faces of her classmates. Silence. Sensei, Uraraka finally said. Aizawa looked at the bubbly girl, eyes were threatening to drown the room in its tears. What do we do? The dorms will be reopened later on today. The drug is being aired out as we speak and drug inspectors are arriving soon to ensure the place is safe. Our principal is installing extra security measures in all dorm buildings for the safety of both staff and students. All Might will take you all back where you can resituate yourselves, Aizawa said. The class slowly nodded, sensing the end of his speech. They wandered away from his meeting circle and strayed into their own groups, each person working through the shock on their own. All Might, Aizawa nudged the blonde man next to him. Stay with them and protect them. See that they get back to the dorms safely. All Might nodded as Aizawa swiftly left the room. He was halfway down the white hallway when someone pulled on his sleeve. He turned ready to punch anyone when, there? At least, until he looked down. Jiro? Aizawa looked down at purple hair. The young student's head was down and her hand was holding on to his sleeve like a lifeline. Aizawa-sensei, her ragged voice breathed out. She was crying, Aizawa realized. Trying with all her strength to hold her sobs at bay, she kept repeating his name. Come here, Aizawa said, gently guiding her to a private waiting room. When they were alone, Aizawa got a cup of water and set it on the table. Jiro was still standing, her hair falling like a curtain in front of her face. I'm so sorry, she whispered. I'm sorry, sensei. I'm so sorry, she cried. Jiro, what's wrong? You have nothing to apologize for, Aizawa asked. His voice was a bit softer than usual, but he kept his strong day-to-day manner on. Changing his attitude now was not going to help. Not when Jiro obviously needed the teacher she sees every day, the teacher she knows and understands. I did something, she managed to say. Oh my god, I killed him. Jiro, what dash? I can't do this. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. He's going to die because of me. It's my fault. It's all my fault. No. Midoriya dashed her attempts at holding back were gone. Her words become mumbled together as her cries overpowered her words. Jiro started to hyperventilate, her breaths becoming too shallow 1 second and too deep another. Aizawa took a moment before stepping forward and gently putting his hand on her head, guiding her to his chest. He wrapped his hand loosely around the young student and pulled her into a hug. Jiro's movements didn't stutter once as she pushed herself into Aizawa's comforting arms. It was as if she was trying to hide from Aizawa's eyes. No, that wasn't. She was hiding from his judgment, his thoughts, his words. She was scared of what he'll have to say, yet had no one but him to turn to. He could feel her tears seeping through his shirt, but he didn't care. He tightened the hug a bit more as Jiro grabbed onto his shirt with white knuckles and buried herself in it with tears, cries, and mumbled words. Jiro's legs gave out, falling to the ground and taking Aizawa with her. He took a step forward to balance himself and Jiro out before slowing her descent into a praying-like position, her head and arms still in Aizawa's chest. He and his student just sat there. She seemed so small in his arms. So fragile. So innocent. It was just another reminder of how horrible his job was. He had 3 years to train and prep these excited hero wannabes for the real world. 3 years to teach them how to fight for their lives. 3 years to give them all the possible information he could to make sure they don't die. How to call for help when your legs aren't moving. How to fight when you're weaponless and quirkless. How to fight when it's your life and 300 other civilians on the line, all depending on you to save them. Are 3 years enough to teach them how to mourn a lost one? How keep living when everyone is dying? How to keep fighting when everything is gone? It's why he expelled so many students. It wasn't if they had potential or not, but if they could survive the horrible world of heroes. It had nothing to do with how fast they ran or how high they jumped or how even strong they were. It was if they were on the bottom of life's food chain, if they were alone against everyone, if they had nothing but themselves, could they persevere? It was about the race, not the finish line. He was going to expel Midoriya the minute he finished the first 6 tests. Sure, he saw his determination. He saw his drive. But he also saw a hero fanboy. Engulfed by flashy heroes' facades and high on a hero's supposed happy lifestyle, he saw someone who was finally living out their dream but wasn't ready to make it a reality. He saw someone who thought saving a person from a burning building was all that was needed to be the hero. He saw a naive go-getter who would only get himself killed because of his heroic blindness. He was proven wrong. When Midoriya knew he was the underdog in the race to the top, he fought. He fought and fought until the very end. Through a broken finger too. He was indeed a hero fanboy who believed and grew up in the world of heroes, but was also ready to make it a reality. Ready to face anything that came to him, even expulsion from his living dream, and fought with everything he had. He may not know what was to come, but he would be ready when it did. He looked down at Jiro crying into his shirt. He was still a kid. They all were. Was 3 years enough time? Should it be enough time? Aizawa felt Jiro calm down a bit. Jiro, he called out softly. What's wrong? I heard them. It was the first clear sentence she had in the 10 minutes of crying. Aizawa took a breath. What do you mean? Jiro gently wormed her way out of Aizawa's arms and looked up at him. Her eyes were red and puffy. She was still shaking, but not as badly. The bags on her eyes were prominent. Her cheeks were red and tear-stained. Aizawa's eyes softened. I have special earbuds I wear when I sleep. My quirk tends to activate when I'm asleep, which means I hear everything around me. Kaminari accidentally overcharged them Thursday night and broke them. Friday night, everyone was already asleep. I could hear them all breathe and shift around in their beds. I counted them. To me, it's like counting sheep. It puts me asleep. I was about to fall asleep when I heard footsteps. Aizawa's breath stopped. They walked up and down the hallways, stopping on the 2nd floor. I thought it was you or All Might Sensei, so I ignored it. But I know your footsteps. I know how both of you walk. They weren't like yours, thought. I still rationalized that it was you. I thought maybe it was someone going to the kitchen. But still, I knew it wasn't any of them. I still ignored it though. I fell asleep then. And because of me, Midoriya is gone. It's my fault, Sensei. She shoved her head back into Aizawa's chest, hiding from his line of sight. Aizawa didn't dwell on that information. Jiro was spiraling into sobs and self-guilt again, and he needed to pull her out. He did the only thing he could think of in that moment. He gently and subtly moved her head to the left part of his chest so her ear was against his shirt. "Do you hear that?" he asked softly. "Why your heart?" Jiro asked, sniffling. "Heartbeat. Did you know that when people lie, their heartbeat changes?" "Yeah. I'm going to tell you the truth. You can check for yourself if I'm lying then." She nodded. "It is not your fault. None of this was. You were tired. You physically exhausted from a day of training and mentally tired from a day of school. You wanted to sleep. Your body wanted to sleep. When you heard something, your mind told you the first thing it could to focus on sleep. Do not blame yourself for a body's natural reaction. I'm glad you didn't go out there and confront whatever or whoever that was on the second floor. Not because you aren't trained enough or aren't smart enough, but because that floor had a double dosage of the drug. If you went down there, you would have landed up like Mineta or Oyama. It was smart to keep to yourself. With something as unknown as this, it is only logical to protect yourself," Aizawa finished. "Will you expel me?" Jiro's small voice asked. "Do you want to be?" Aizawa asked. "No. I want to be a hero. But what kind of hero turns a blind eye in a situation like this?" Aizawa didn't hesitate. "A smart one. A hero who subconsciously knew that this intruder wasn't a teacher or a student and kept herself safe in her room while being half-conscious and half-sleep-ridden. You deserve your spot in this class. You deserve to be a hero, Jiro. And even if you did go out and look at who's up, you may not have gotten to the second floor. Because I'm not fast enough. I'm not strong enough. I'm not Dash. The drug would have already taken you." Jiro went silent. If this was Friday night and the person was already in the dorm room walking around, they were probably setting off the drug. You wouldn't have made it to Midoriya's room in time or with enough energy to fight without breathing the drug in and falling to its contents. You are not to blame. There was nothing anyone could do. But you or All Might would have dashed. Clones ourselves? Woken ourselves up from a drug-induced coma? Slept, walked, talked, and fought off an intruder no one knew of or saw. Heroes can't do everything, Aizawa said. But that doesn't mean they still don't fight. I don't understand. At times, the hardest part of the fight is the one after the dust has settled. Whether it is physical recovery, emotional mourning, suffering a loss, a death, or anything, the moments after a fight is when heroes have to fight the hardest. You made it through the fight. You survived the night. Now you have to live the day, Aizawa said. Oh, don't blame yourself, Jiro. There is nothing to be blamed for after all. There was more silence as Jiro continued to listen to Aizawa's heartbeat. After a while, she asked him something. Aizawa-sensei? Yes? Is it true that you once fell out of a tree and into a pond when you were at UA? That you tried to rescue a cat, but it jumped at you and you fell? She asked innocently. Aizawa's ears went slightly red, but he shoved it off. Where did you hear that from? Present mic? Then no. There was another silence. Aizawa-sensei? She asked again. That was a lie, she said, her ear still against his chest. Aizawa could feel her smile. He playfully pushed her off him before looking at his student. She looked more relaxed now. Maybe because she finally took her secret off her chest or because she was so tired. Aizawa didn't know. He helped her to her feet and walked her back to the quarantine lounge where Toshinori had the majority of the class around him like a bunch of little kids and their childcare teacher reading a storybook. The doors opened and Aizawa and Jiro walked in. Glitter bomb right to the face. News reporters and photographers got that picture of me at sunset and thought it was the most picturesque moment in history. I'll you all never do a photo shoot with glitter or run into a villain whose quirk can shoot glitter out of their hands. All Might's loud but gentle voice said to the smiling teens. What? Are you suggesting we just run away? What if the glitter villain is holding a person at glitter point? It is our jobs as heroes to save the civilians. Ida said, chopping his hand up and down at All Might. Uraraka was next to him holding in a laugh while Kirishima and Kaminari were already dying in giggles. G glitter point? Ashido whispered to Yoroyozu, stifling a laugh. Are you suggesting we run away? Ida asked as seriously as he would in class. Yes. Run away. Run away while you can, All Might deadpanned, his voice so serious, it could have rivaled Aizawa's. But All Might? Ida stuttered out, flabbergasted at All Might's suggestion. That sent everyone over. It was nothing like seeing 14 students laugh so hard, they started to cry in a hospital quarantine room. Several of them fell to their knees, holding their guts and trying not to pass out from laughs while rolling back and forth on the rug like they were on fire, all with smiles and crinkled eyes. Aizawa savored the moment. It wasn't long before All Might looked up at Aizawa and Jiro. A bit shocked to see him there and Jiro's tear-tracked face, he played it off well. Young Jiro, tell me as a hero in training, what would you do if you ran into a glitter villain? Save the civilian but condemn your hair to be a sparkling purple for the next 3 lifetimes or, as the Americans say, get out of Dodge? Jiro looked at her classmates, then at Ida whose sharp eyes begged Jiro for an answer. I mean, glitter is the herpes of the art room. And I'm all about health so? Jiro, that is not the hero mentality. Ida scolded while the rest of the class dissolved into even more teary laughs. Aizawa-sensei, as an underground hero, the civilian always comes first, correct? A few spurts of glitter would be nothing compared to a normal person's life, right? Aizawa looked down at his student who was the only one standing sans himself and Jiro. He had 2 options. 1, be the teacher and correct his confused student's thoughts or play along with All Might's antics. Ida, he announced. The entire room shut up. Even All Might stopped smiling. Did he really scare this class that much? The boy in question straightened up even more than before and turned all ears on Aizawa. Sir, glitter is both harmful to the lungs and to the environment. Should you march into a situation where there are more losses than wins? Think about the future and think about the other outcomes when you decide on villain attacks. There is more thought in a rescue or hostage situation than if the victim makes it out alive or not. Bystanders, building structure, your own personal health. Everything affects everything. In a manner with a glitter villain, chances are they would hit me with a glitter shower, forcing my eyes shut. I would be at a disadvantage in more ways than one. My quirk would be useless and my visibility would be shot. I wouldn't be able to use my capture weapon as accurately, which would give the villain another way to take me down. Instead, I would request backup. Take them out with numbers and overpower them without the use of their quirk. That way they would be secured without any possible lung damage. Aizawa said. When the class didn't pick up his over-exaggeration on a glitter villain, he begrudgingly added the last remark. Kissing his stoic and cool reputation down the drain, he took a breath. Plus, glitter ruins the aesthetic. Silence. Absolute silence. The entire room busted with loud, obnoxious laughs. PFF, FIFA, ha, ha. Kirishima screamed, laughed. Ha, they can't dash. Breath, my dude, Kaminari said, struggling to breathe himself. You gotta be breathe dash. Ha, G guys. Please tell me someone got that one tape? Ha ha ha. Ishido's asked the group with her normal big smile. Momo? Did you get that? Why, you were recording All Might's past adventures already, so pretty please tell me you got that. Yoroyozu looked shamefully at Aizawa and nodded. I'm sorry, sensei, but I did. She clicked the button in her hand and Aizawa's voice rang out. Plus, glitter ruins the aesthetic? That sent another wave of laughter through the room. Kirishima's contagious laugh infected everyone in the room. He looked at everyone rolling, crying, and dying of laughter. Why they were laughing so hard? He had several thoughts. What? They were all sleep-drunk and anything would send them over. Their immature behavior just found his words and Ida's attitude funny. Or 3. They were all still shocked and sad that they all lied about their feelings to each other. Caught up in the fake laughs and smiling facades, they started to believe those thoughts in a desperate escape from spiraling self-doubt Aizawa knew they all were drowning in. Any and every emotion suppressed by them from Midoriya's disappearance expressed themselves in the form of rib-cracking laughter. It was so sad to see them this happy, knowing full well it wasn't happiness any of these kids were feeling. The truth was that none of them knew what they were feeling. So when All Might shared his apparently funny story, It gave them all an emotion to feel, even if it wasn't what they were feeling. The body and mind took it the extreme. It was their way of releasing emotions. Aizawa looked at his class, blissfully oblivious to their fellow classmates' situation. They all had smiles and teary eyes, and he was the reason for it. He really does hate his job. Time, 10:56 a.m. Midoriya's eyes shot open as he gulped down breath after breath, desperate for air. Expecting to be shivering wet with water in his lungs, Midoriya woke to be shivering dry with tears in his eyes. He quickly wiped them away as the dream replayed in his mind. He was drowning under 6 feet of ice, freezing cold and alone. In his dream, Midoriya was absolutely terrified. He could fight a villain any day, be held hostage or at gunpoint at any time. He could go 6 villains against 1 and not back down. He could shine his bright smile at any sort of danger. He would give everything he had to protect someone, even if there were a foe. It was an ideology rooted deep inside him since he first fell in love with heroes. But, drowning, cold and alone, that terrified him more than any villain could. Thank goodness it was just a dream, right? There was a split second when he woke up that felt like every weight on his chest had been lifted, a kind of relief almost. That it was just a dip in the road and that he could easily jump out and continue on his way. That it was 2 a.m. in the morning and he had school in a couple of hours. That he would meet up with his friends and all walk to the classroom. That he would train and study harder than the day before. That he'd make it as a hero with his friends and family by his side. But the weights were still there. He was still cold. He was still alone. His friends weren't with him and he didn't know the next time he'd even be able to see UA again. The split second wasn't over in a flash either. Instead, it took its sweet time to draw in hope and blissful ignorance for Midoriya to believe that everything was fine, only for the truthful realization to hit. Sure, him drowning in a freezing pool was a bad dream, but he's alive and awake now. So why does it feel like the nightmare just started? Suddenly, those stray tears kept coming. Midoriya viciously rubbed his eyes, but the tears wouldn't stop. He didn't want to cry. He couldn't cry. He only had 5 days of air and probably already used up 1 day. Once his air is gone, Midoriya choked. Something in his stomach turned. He wanted to throw up at the mere thought. He'd die. Midoriya first stopped rubbing his eyes as the shock, no, the realization settled in. He'd die alone. He'd die failing at his one and only dream. He'd die before he could actually save people and make a difference. He'd die before he could become a pro-hero. Midoriya's breath hitched. He'd die before he could graduate his first year at high school. He'd die a 16-year-old boy who hadn't even had their first kiss. Midoriya's eyes were flooded with silent tears. How sad was that? His classmates depended on him. He'd fail. His mother loved him and wanted him to just be safe. He'd fail. His teachers looked to him and expect greatness from him. He'd fail. All Might needed him. He'd fail. That broke the dam. Midoriya let out the loudest silent cry the world will never hear. His mouth was stuck in an own position while tears rolled down his face in shocking horror. His eyes were squeezed tight as if he shut them hard enough, nothing would be real and he would go back to his old life. Midoriya brought his bloodied and broken hand to cover his mouth and nose as he let out another pitchless, agonizing cry. The waves and waves of realization washed over in gut-wrenching, excruciatingly horrible tides, drowning him in a sea of guilt, regret, and fear. It was sad. There weren't really any other words to describe this cry other than painful. Silent. If no one found him, he would die. Such a simple concept. Midoriya knew was going to die. Everyone does. Maybe he was just naive in thinking he would go out in a more meaningful way. Jumping in front of a bullet for a friend? Taking down a foe? Dying of old age? Maybe that stuff really does only happen in fiction. Midoriya shakily inhaled. There's still so much he wants to do. He wanted to go to America and train where All Might used to train. He wanted to try Todoroki's mother's soba one day. He wanted to race Ito with their quirks. He wanted to re-befriend Kacchan and mend their shattered relationship. He wanted to tell Uraraka how much she means to him and how much he wants her. He wants to make it pro. He wants to open his own agency. He wants to eat chocolate cake all night and pay for it in the morning. He wants to hop rooftops in the night. He wants to travel the world. Train till he collapses. Beat Kirishima in poker. Get a tattoo. Beat a big-time villain and save the day. Become the next symbol of peace. Protect everyone and anyone he can. Maybe even start a family. He wants to go to school. Turn in that essay. Help Mina and Uraraka with math. He wants his eardrums to be blown out by present Mike again because he sat in the front row once. He wants his bones to ache after a day of training. To clean the kitchen with his classmates because they did a blindfolded brownie challenge. He wants to be stupid. To be smart. To be heartbroken. To have fun. He just wants to live. But now, he has only 5 days to survive. He exhaled with a silent sob. His life was over before it even began. He shuddered as the emotions rolled through him. Was he just that naive? He bit harder into his hand, drawing blood onto his pale, scared hand. Or was life just out to get him? He got lightheaded. He was finally starting his dream. It was a good time even with all the villain attacks. His back curled in on itself. He loved every moment of Yue. His teeth started to numb. But just like all good things, his entire body tensed and the emotions pushed through him one last time. It must come to an end. Midoriya gave up trying to twist and curl. He instead laid there helpless with pitiful sobs rocketing through his decaying body. His head hurt from bouncing against the walls and laying in such a position for so long. His broken and jammed toes finally started to tingle with pain. His wrist wobbled uselessly as the blood dribbled down from his bite marks. His body was exhausted, stiff, sore. But his mind, it kept going, and going and going. What about One for All? What about the power All Might gave him? The expectations set for him? He was supposed to be the next symbol of peace. But if he dies, then no one would be left to pass One for All on. The quirk that protected Japan for 200 years was going to die in a high school 16-year-old, 6 feet under the ground. Everything All Might has done, everything he sacrificed for the world, for him, it'd all be for nothing. He'd fail the past 8 predecessors. He'd fail Japan. He'd fail the entire hero world. Midoriya bit harder and harder into his hand as the guilt kept crushing him further and further into his grave. He'd fail everyone if he died. He tried to shake off the impending doom of his death and look to hope. He didn't know how long he was buried for, but his classmates and teachers will know if he's gone. They'll know that we was kidnapped. The heroes would come. They would save the day. They would save him. They had to. Midoriya shook his desperate thoughts. Heroes always win anyways, right? Midoriya knew he was just lying to himself. He diverted all of his emotions into hope for the heroes. He wanted to live because he wanted to be a hero. He still wanted to save people. He couldn't do that if he was dead after all. He needed to be there for his friends, for his mother, for everyone else. He needed to live for others like a true hero. Or so his lies say. The reality is much more selfish. Dying a useless Deku he believed himself to be for 10 long years. It's only been a few months at UA, but he's changed. He's more social, loving, and outgoing thanks to the great friends he's made. His teachers care about him and want him to succeed, which only fueled his raging fire to be a hero. He's grown up, matured, learned. He's changed. But deep down, he's still scared. He's still the scared little boy who's afraid of the dark, who fears tight spaces, who's scared to be alone. And here he was, facing all 3 at once. Midoriya was not scared of death. Instead, he was scared of dying. The torturous seconds that could feel like a lifetime, it went beyond just physical pain. It's time where a person is still conscious and unwillingly dancing the line between life and death, where all they can think about is how many people will weep over their dead body. How many missed chances passed them. How many paths their life could have gone down. All of their wishes, their regrets, their everything, it all flashes before their near lifeless eyes. And Midoriya's seconds have been drawing on for the past 24 hours. He was alone, trapped with nothing but his thoughts, his failures, his disappointments, his wishes and hopes with no power to make any of them come true. He was stuck dancing forever in the lonely land of the non-living and lively dead. Midoriya sobbed again, his bloodied hand pitifully scratching at the coffin's top at a last-ditch effort of escaping, tears streaming down his cheeks and neck. Please, just let me out," he begged. He breathed in deeply only for all his air to escape him. The pain in his nailless fingers was numbed by the overwhelming torrent of desperateness and guilt. "Please." His eyes squeezed shut in a selfish realization. "I don't want to die." Tsukachi shuffled the files in his hands as he stood in the cool October morning. The sun was up, peeking through the red, orange, and yellow leaves, dotting the surrounding trees like a child's finger painting. Bird chirps sounded the background and small buzzes sang with them. Not a cloud floated in the faint blue sky. A gentle breeze kissed Tsukachi's cheek, whipping his trench coat idly. It really was a beautiful day. He knocked on the large red door 3 times before a skinny and gaunt-looking Yagi Tashinori opened up. He looked oddly put together. From his wrinkle-free button-down to his nicely combed hair, he looked like he was going out for the night. "Naomasa?" "Yagi," Tsukachi greeted. Yagi opened the door further as Tsukachi walked inside. Tsukachi hadn't been around teenagers in such a long time. As a detective, he's carried out interviews with teens and will sometimes intervene during domestic or school issues revolving around the youngsters, but he's never been around normal teenagers, let alone their living quarters. Maybe it was an assumption or maybe it was a stereotype, but aren't teenagers supposed to be messy? He discarded his shoes at the door as he looked around the spotless communal area. The floors were waxed and washed, curtains cleaned and even, lamps dusted and shined. The couch was plumped and pillows turned, table ring-free, and perfectly perpendicular to the other pieces of furniture. The kitchen had no dishes in its shining sink, nor was there any pieces of trash lying around. In fact, other than coffee makers and a mug holder, there was nothing on the countertops. The entire place looked like a store showroom, not a high school dorm room. Yagi must have noticed Tsukachi looking around. They wanted to do a deep clean. The sanitization specialists already aired the dorms out, but still. Young Ishido lead the force as everyone deep cleaned the entire building, he said fondly. "I see. It's, clean," Tsukachi said slowly. Yagi began walking to the kitchen, taking out 2 mugs and a kettle. "Is tea all right?" he asked simply. Tsukachi found Yagi's eyes, the one thing that did not match this facade. While his clothes spoke sophistication, his eyes spit pity. His pearly white teeth were nothing to his red puffy eyes. Yagi could try faking his emotions, but he wouldn't get far. "Yes, thank you," Tsukachi said, taking a seat at the breakfast bar. "How are you holding up?" The mug in Yagi's hand slipped ever so slightly before his hero reflexes kicked in and caught it. He filled up the kettle. "I am doing all right, thank you," he said too quietly. Was that the atmosphere around here? Soft? Quiet? Tiptoeish? And the students? Yagi took a breath before exhaling a long drawn-out sigh. "Coping. I have 2 students in the training room who haven't left since we all arrived back at the dorms. Midoriya's neighbors are sleeping the drug off, still wary of what happened. The girls are all in Uraraka's room and the boys are all in each other's dorms. They are all relying on each other and being there for each other, which better than them closing off. Aizawa thinks they are plotting to rescue Midoriya themselves, but if our last talk was anything, young Yaoyorozu will keep them all in line," he said with a faint smile. "They are all removed in?" Tsukachi asked. He knew that all the personal items of the students were also quarantined and sanitized while everyone was drugged up. Though going through 20 students' belongings and 8 teachers' entire apartment, Tsukachi's CSIs and Recovery Girls hospital connections made sure everything was safe, private, and properly handled. Most of them. Some just left their boxes outside their dorm rooms to go somewhere else. Others are completely revamping their dorms. "A good distraction, I guess," Yagi said, putting 2 bags in their cups. Tsukachi nodded, allowing the conversation to go into a comfortable silence. The kettle began to whistle, steaming shooting out the little nozzle. Yagi poured the water, sipped the tea, and threw out the bags. Yagi added a small bit of honey to his own while offering to Tsukachi, who politely shook his head. After a few more moments of silence, Yagi spoke up. You need to interview them, don't you? Tsukachi gently put his cup down on the saucer, looking Yagi straight in the eye. For a man who's done years of police and detective work, from the thousands of cases involving children and families, from the hundreds of faces and criminals he's seen, nothing is worse than looking into a parent's eye and physically seeing them fall apart. The look they give him, the wobbly words, clutched fists desperate for his news to be lies, eyes tearful and shattered, it really does wear on him. The look Yagi is giving him right now, it looked too much like a parent. While Yagi wasn't tearing the seams, his entire body was filled with well-concealed tells. But now really, who'd lie to a detective whose quirk is truth detector? I do, he said simply. Knowing what Midoriya did, where he went, how he went about his day, anything can help up find him. I see, Yagi said quietly. He looked down into his steaming cup of tea. Can I be there? None of my students have been interrogated before. Perhaps a familiar face will help them open up? Tsukachi looked at the poor man. He sighed. Yagi, I know you want to be there for them, but even you know how detrimental that can be. While they may open up with you there, they may also lie, change their answers, incorporate non-existent memories in their heads if they possibly knew something. Shame? Embarrassment? Whatever emotion they would be going through, their perspective is everything. You are their teacher, but they are heroes in training. Teenagers. They may not be able to hold a building up with their hands, but they can at least hold on to themselves. They all need some hand in this investigation, and this is the most important and safest way to do so. Ah, it was worth a try, Yagi chuckled. May I ask what questions you are asking? I know police interview confidentiality, but afterward. If they need me, I'll have some sense of what's in their mind. That, Tsukachi said, sliding the large binder of folders over the counter. I can do. A few more innocent moments, Yagi devised a line-up based on emotional levels and social connections. Friends groups would go one after another to comfort each other if need be afterward. Individuals whose emotions run high in these times go after someone whose emotions are a bit more reserved, to help with anxiety. Those who spent the most time with Midoriya would go first and would follow the web of students. A simple plan. He only had a few questions to ask, but going through 17 of them, some no doubt with longer stories to share, would probably take time. While time wasn't exactly on his side, Sansa was back at the school sharing the information the police already have gathered the day before and gaining some hero insight. Tsukachi already divided up the teachers that would be sent on the first patrol around UA and the surrounding sites just in case the kidnapper strikes again. He also made calls to the Hawks agency asking Hawks if he would aid in the actual search. His geographic pro-lifers created a rough outline of all the possible places a body could be buried in Musafatu, and with Hawks taking the skies and his heroes, officers and fellow detectives on the streets, they could cover more ground. Everything was pre-planned by him and his own team. Tsukachi trusted that Sansa would take care of everything there. Anyways, he had business here. Ida Tenya, right? Tsukachi asked. He and the blue-haired class president was sitting in the common room, on the floor surprisingly enough. Sitting awkwardly on the couches and chairs would only fan their fires of anxiety, and he didn't need that. He wanted them to be relaxed and sitting on the floor, allowed to take the stuffy sophistication out of things. Plus, having the coffee table come up to their chests would help anyone who needed some security in their answers, a place to hide. Yes, sir, he answered. All right, Tsukachi said. He didn't want to write anything down unless it was a very important detail. If watching Aizawa grade papers in front of them was nerve-wracking, a detective writing your every answer about your friend's disappearance couldn't be any better. Instead, his hidden mic would pick up all the other little details for him. We're here on Friday night? Or did you go somewhere after school ended? I was, sir. Uraraka, Todoroki, and dashed. His slight hesitation didn't go unnoticed by Tsukachi, but it did go unsaid. Midoriya came back to the dorms at 3:30 p.m., sir, Ida said, shoving his glasses aggressively up his nose. His shoulders were stiff and his words overly polite. You're Nenjium's younger brother, right? Tsukachi asked, taking another route. With a less stiff nod, he continued. He's a great hero. I've had the honor before working with him. Quiet the joker too. The last case we worked together, he tried to get Sansa to race him for 2,000 yen. Guess who won? Tensei? Ida asked uncertainly. While the question was far from his scholarly ones, the small glint of awe in his red eyes gave Tsukachi the opening he needed. Logically, that would be a yes. However, before they raced, one of my officers telekinetically tied his laces together. When the signal was given, Ingenium's laces snapped him too, blowing his shoes apart from his elbow's acceleration. He fell. Sansa won. Ingenium was 2,000 yen poorer, Tsukachi retold, reminiscing on the retired hero's days. I'll have to talk to him about that, sir. He shouldn't be making challenging officers to small challenges like that. Focus is everything. I apologize for Tensei's actions, sir. Please forgive me, Ida said loudly, his arms up and chopping. Tsukachi smiled a bit before catching Ida's eye. It's no problem. It was a good distraction. I see, sir, he breathed, getting the idea. He closed his eyes and went through his afternoon. When we got back, Midoriya went to go do homework in his room while I went to the track field. He and Uraraka were supposed to study together after dinner too, I believe. I only came down for dinner before going back up into my room. His head dropped. I'm sorry I am not to any use. Tsukachi frowned. Did all the students have this much self-doubt? Ida, keep your head up. Your place in this case is beside your classmates. You are their class president, their leader. You all may be the same age, but everyone looks to their leader, Ida. The boy's head rose and met with Tsukachi's. He smiled slightly and nodded. Thank you, sir. Will that be all? Yes. Can you get Uraraka? Tsukachi asked, looking down at the 18 more students to go. Yes, sir. Turns out, Uraraka forgot about her study date with Midoriya and was in Ishido's room with Azui and Hagurake watching movies till they all went to their own dorms around 8 o'clock. The two other girls only talked with Midoriya that night at dinner. None of them knew what he did afterward. Wajiro, Tokoyami, coulda never talked with Midoriya until dinner with bits of conversation here and there, and Aoyama didn't interact with him either. I don't know, Aoyama yawned. His eyes were drooping and his shoulders were threatening to curl up right there on the floor and sleep. Made sense after all, he did just wake a few hours ago and was bound to feel the side effects. He had to get Yagi to wake the poor teen up. Je suis endormi at 7:30? Je ne sais pas, monsieur. Aizawa-sensei's training was tiring. Thank you, Aoyama, Tsukachi said, checking the 9th student off. Mineta was doing stuff Tsukachi wished he didn't have his truth quirk for, and Kirishima, Siro, and Sato were helping with dinner that night with Midoriya too. I baked everyone some dessert and Momo helped, but Midoriya went outside for some reason and never took a piece. I have some leftover in the fridge too, Sato said, glancing at the refrigerator. My parents sent me new extracts, but I just got them now. I don't know when Midoriya came back. Thank you, Sato, he said. The teen nodded and left the common room. I went to the library with a few others. When we came back, I did some laundry and took a shower before dinner was ready. I asked if they needed help, but somehow, Midoriya knew I wasn't feeling the greatest because of my quirk overuse during training that day and sent me away, she said fondly. I helped clean up after dinner, though, and helped decorate Sato's brownies. My favorite documentary was on at 7, but couldn't finish it. I went upstairs an hour later. Thank you, Yaoyorozu. We helped make Midoriya's mom's katsudon recipe. Cut my finger on the knife though, Kirishima said, holding his bandaged finger. Midoriya left for a bit after we finished eating but came back soon after. Todoroki, Kaminari, Midoriya, and I played a few games of poker. I made him cry. He chuckled to himself. He ran out of money and accidentally used up Kaminari's stock too. It was kind of funny too. He started to apologize and everything to Kaminari, but neither of us could keep a straight face. I mean, he lost well over $100 that night, but he kept betting against me. That kid can't lie for his life though, Kirishima said, a wide reminiscent smile on his face. I went to bed at 8 or so. Training with Bakugo really tired me out. Thank you, Kirishima. Before leaving though, he looked back at Tsukachi. We'll find him, right? He asked, his voice deeper and more serious. We found Bakugo last time, so we'll find Midoriya too, right? Tsukachi didn't answer. Bakugo's case and Midoriya are not the same. However, we will work just as hard to get him back. Trust in your teachers, Kirishima. Everyone is working to find him. Thank you, sir. After I taped Kirishima's finger, we all ate. Sato's brownies were really good, but I don't think Kaminari liked them, Shiro said, shaking his head. Midoriya didn't know what he was missing though. I thought they were the highlight of the night. Do you know why Midoriya went outside? Tsukachi asked for the 4th time that day. So far, everyone just saw him leave at 7 o'clock, but no one knows why. Kirishima said he left after dinner? No, sir, Shiro said, looking away. I think I heard his phone go off, but I can't be sure. Everyone was walking around after dinner. Thank you, Shiro, Tsukachi said softly. Shiro grimaced before walking back to his dorm. Bakugo Katsuki? Tsukachi asked. The blonde boy was unhappily sitting crisscrossed on the pillow, his arms crossed and his face scowling. Yeah, he muttered. You have any leads on Deku? No, Tsukachi said simply. But hopefully through your insight, we can see what happened and when. What did you do Friday night? Bakugo looked at the detective, something in those ruby-red eyes Tsukachi couldn't read. Came back to the dorms after school and changed. Sharktooth and I went to the gymnasium to train. Ate dinner. Went to bed at 8. Tsukachi's eye matched Bakugo's, who wasn't looking at his. The kid went to bed at 8? That's all. Bakugo narrowed his eyes at Tsukachi's staring. Yeah. Went to the gym at 4, worked out till 6, ate dinner, and Sato stupid brownies, and went to bed. What about it? He said, defensively. I see. Did you talk with Midoriya that night? Oh. Told him to screw off a few times, but that's it. Last time I saw him, he was crying with half and half, Sharky and Pikachu. I went upstairs afterward. They talked a few more questions and the interview was over, but Bakugo didn't move. You can go if dash. This isn't the league, is it? He suddenly asked. Someone asked back at the hospital, but Aizawa-sensei never responded. This isn't them, is it? Tsukachi looked down at the teen and saw just that. A teen. The first-place winner of the sports festival, the tiny bundle of explosive power, one of the top students in Class 1A, and all he saw was a teenager. He never talked with Bakugo after his rescue, but he could imagine what scenarios are going through his head. Oh. It isn't the league. But Deku may be Deku, but no one. Bakugo hesitated. No one deserves to sit chained up like that. Shigariki, Dabi, it was like death itself radiated off them. Wherever Deku is, it's better than being with the league, Bakugo huffed. Tsukachi's reassurers must have calmed him in some say as he walked much more fluidly back to his room. Oh, the obliviousness. Thank you, Bakugo. Looking down at his chart, he only had 3 more students to go. Todoroki said Midoriya got a text message and had to go one of the gymnasiums to grab something he forgot. Did he tell you who texted him? The red and white-haired boy's eyes coolly looked into Tsukachi's, like he was subtly trying to read the man without giving away any tells. No. When did he leave? 7 p.m. Yoero's favorite document show was beginning when we were downstairs, Todoroki said, his eyes gazing at the blank TV. Kirishima and Kaminari asked if we wanted to play a game of poker and began setting everything up while Sato gave us all something he made. We waited until he got back. When did he return? And with what? Tsukachi asked, actually pulling out a pen and paper now. Kirishima never said anything about Midoriya leaving before their game of poker, nor did anyone talk about what he came back with. If Midoriya was the only one gone from the dorms, then that could have been the time when they all were drugged somehow. A notebook. One of his hero analysis's notebooks, I believe. He came back 10 or so minutes later. We started the game and ended it. Kirishima went to his room around 8. I got very tired too and retired to my own dorm. Kaminari and Midoriya were the last ones downstairs. Thank you, Todoroki. The teen nodded and got to his feet. He looked down at the detective who was shuffling the next student's file around. Sir? Tsukachi looked up into the heterochromatic eyes. Yes? Is my father in this case? He asked quietly. No, Tsukachi said. While Endeavor's quirk is powerful, there is nothing physically he can do that isn't what the others are doing. Oh. He looked at the ground behind Tsukachi's head, imagining the Friday night he last saw his best friend. Do you need him? I can convince him to come to you. Him being the number one hero has its perks. Endeavor, though the number one hero, is still just a hero. Midoriya's case is taking priority in both UA and at the police stations, but the country is still moving. People still need saving. Tsukachi smiled, thinking of another situation he heard someone say this. And sometimes, doing the most for the ones you care about is doing nothing at all. While you are well connected, any means to recruit Endeavor will be purely through his agency and the police. Doing nothing at all? Are heroes not supposed to do everything they can do? Take the hardest path because no one else will? Todoroki asked with a bit more emotion than he expected. He stopped, recomposed himself, and bowed his head. I apologize. Don't, Todoroki. That mentality is more common than anything in a hero's head and is the hardest move to perform. You remind me of someone when you say that too, Tsukachi said with a gentle smile. One of your teachers, in fact. All Might Sensei? The teen asked, a bit surprised by his own words. Aizawa Sensei, Tsukachi said, taking a small pride in himself as the boy's eyes got slightly bigger. He too wanted to go out and search for Midoriya, but that was not where he would be most efficient. He is by no means doing nothing in his investigation, but doing something a bit more indirect. Taking the back seat for this ride. I see, sir, Todoroki said, his face a bit more relaxed. Thank you. With a little bow, he left, bring the remaining students down to 2. Jiro Kyoka? Earphone jack? Tsukachi asked, looking at the student in front of him. While the entire past 2 hours have been filled with nervous teens and shaky answers, Jiro looks by far the most nervous. Her head was down and refused to look up at Tsukachi, her purple hair dropping in front of her face. Yes, sir, she said softly. Tsukachi's detective skills picked up at her tone. Quiet. So, what? No, there was something else there. I can listen for ultra-quiet sounds with my mutation. There it is. Guilt. What did you do Friday night? Tsukachi started off. She hesitantly looked up at Tsukachi only for her eyes to find his nose instead. She looked tired, just like everyone else. Her eyes were red like Ida's and drooping like Aoyama's, but her shoulders were tensed and stiff. I went to the library after school with Momo and Hagurake. We came back to the dorms and hung out for a while before we ate dinner. IW went to bed at 8:30-ish, but didn't fall asleep right away. I heard something. Tsukachi's face never changed. Aizawa already told me what Jiro knew, but he wanted to hear it for himself. Something? Someone, she stuttered out. And my quirk works when I'm asleep and someone accidentally broke them Thursday night. I could hear everyone in the dorm that night and, she stopped, finally locking eyes with Tsukachi. Guilt clear in her eyes. I heard someone. Tsukachi kept his voice light and welcoming, even if he did want to scream and throw up every thought his detective mind came up with. Do you know who? No. Was it one of your classmates? No. I know their footsteps, their heartbeats, their strides, and they weren't anyone I knew. Their footsteps were really, light and really quiet even with my quirk, but I, could hear them as they got closer. They walked up to each floor and stopped on the second. I think I heard a door opening? I don't know. I never got up to see who it was and I, fell asleep right afterward. Sensei said it was the drug taking effect, but He's right, Tsukachi said, interrupting her. Jiro looked up. I'm sure Aizawa already told you this, but he's right. The drug's effects are strong but timely. These interviews have already given me a good idea of what happened that Friday night, and what you're telling me is only helping. Do you know what time you heard these footsteps? I didn't look at the clock. It wasn't long after I went to my dorm, so around 8:20 or so. Jiro said, thinking hard to herself. Okay, was there anything else you can remember? Anything that Midoriya did or anything out of the ordinary? No. I can't remember anything else, sir, Jiro said. Tsukachi nodded as Jiro sat up from her pillow and left the room. He could hear a bit of chatter before the next and last person came in. Kaminari Denki? Tsukachi asked. If his thoughts were in order, then he was talking to the last person to see Midoriya walking and talking. Yes, sir, he said with a nervous smile. The final one. How are your classmates doing? The electric boy frowned. They're toing. All Might Sensei is talking to each other them as they come back. The majority of them just went back to their dorms, except for Ida. He's such a class president, helping every person out. It's kind of funny to see him try to hug Bakugo. He chuckled. Bakugo doesn't seem like the hug-able type, Tsukachi agreed. Unless you're a living wall like Kirishima, most don't go near him with a 2-foot stick. I try, but alas. He put his hand over his eyes dramatically. 'Tis I who gets blown up? It doesn't bother me though. I've learned that if Mina takes his arms and Kiri by his legs, I can body slam him into the hug. Tsukachi's eyebrows disappeared into his hairline. Kaminari's breath of new aura took Tsukachi by surprise. The majority of his classmates were by no means as enthusiastic as Kaminari nor as excited to talk about anything, let alone his friends. The boy's energy was calming and he had a feeling it wasn't just for Tsukachi. I see. You should see our training together. Bakubro calls it grappling, but I say it's a tickle fight. It's how I win every time, he said proudly. What Midori and Bakugo do though, I don't think people can call it training. What would you call it? Tsukachi asked, fanning the flame that is innocent digressions. Wrestling? Sparring? A murder? Kaminari asked, his own eyebrow quirked. We always have to have either Kirishima, Ida or Todoroki supervise just in case they take it too far. Like, last time, he muttered the last bit. Tsukachi knew he was talking about their after-exams fight when Yagi told Bakugo about One for All. Honestly, if the destruction was as bad as Yagi described, then it was good they had supervision. 2 powerhouses like that? Let me out. Please, I'll do anything. Just let me out. He internally shook the memory. Midoriya won't die. He'll make sure of that. He didn't know him personally, but looking at how he interacts with each of his classmates, seeing Aizawa worried and Yagi shattering over him, his influence on life is bigger than he knew. It just added to his determination. I can understand that, Tsukachi said, keeping his calm face on. What did you do Friday night after school? Took a nap, he said lazily. His bright amber eyes crinkled as he smiled. Probably won't be taking another one of those for a while, but yeah. I took a nap when I got back from school. Ciro and I were going to go play some video games, but he was needed in the kitchen. I ate dinner and went to bed. I apparently was really tired that day. He laughed. What did you have for dinner? Tsukachi asked. He didn't know. Maybe this was just his last student and has already milked any ounce of information he could think of off everyone else, and Kaminari was stuck with the odd, desperate, detailed questions. They made katsudon. Midoriya's recipe was always the best and Sato's skills made for a good Friday night dinner, Kaminari said. Tsukachi sighed. His small burst of intuition was a bust. Dessert was good too. A bit too minty for me but still good. Tsukachi stopped. His heart stopped. Time stopped. Everything in the room stopped. Did you just say mint? Time, 3:08 p.m. The room was bustling with teachers, detectives, officers and outside heroes. Nizu and Tsukachi both thought it best that news of Midoriya Izuku's situation was kept on the down low for the safety of the other students. The public didn't need to know. At least not right now. UA trust has already dropped with the USJ attack and even more so with the training camp incident. If the current situation got leaked not by Tsukachi or himself, UA's reputation would be gone. He will go public with this. But until the control is back in their hands, the captor is narrowed to a general idea and the location of Midoriya is smaller than the whole country. It isn't a secret, not like the other incident, but a delayed announcement. He was ready for the backlash he and his school would receive. The hero society is judgmental. As glorified as it is, the hero wood is just as sinful as the normal one. People judge. People assume. People think for others. Others think for people. The shots aren't called by the ones who should, and things get covered up. Things get exploited. Things get shared that shouldn't be shared, and what should be shared never was. Nizu sighed. This won't be a repeat. He'll make sure of that. Principal, is everything all right? Someone asked beside him. Nizu took a deep breath and looked around at the voice. Thank you, Present Mike. I am all right. The clad-in-leather hero nodded wearily before returning his attention ongoing conversation. It's been 3 hours that Nizu has sat in this meeting. Surrounded by 30 of his staff members, the others all on patrols, 20 officers, out-of-school heroes, and a few surrounding agency members, the meeting was slow going. The information they had led to dead ends. Patrol reports were empty, and the messages were just as coded as the entire case. The heroes were at a complete loss. That was until their savior walked through the door. Detective Sansa, one of Tsukachi's right-hand men, called out. The huge UA doors opened dramatically as the tired but determined-looking detective walked through. Tsukachi, Snipe said, walking away from the 3-table-large map to the detective. You find anything? Facts. Guesses. I hope with you all, those guesses will also be facts, Tsukachi said, his eyes filled with something Nizu couldn't read. Anxiousness? Fatigue? Drive? Human emotions are too confusing. Please share, Nizu said, sipping from his tea. The room settled down as heroes and officers all found their seats. The agency workers situated themselves near the officers while the UA alumni sat close to teachers. Everyone shut up as Tsukachi stood in the center of the room. He cleared his throat before opening his first file. I came from the police station after my interviews with Class 1A. While most of the information shared was relatively innocent and unrelated to Midoriya's case, there were a few things that weren't. One being TWG 34. I thought we agreed that the dorms were gassed after Midoriya was taken? A third-year teacher asked, pen in hand and eyes on Tsukachi. That was the most logical way, but according to, he narrowed his eyes at the paper. Kaminari Denki, Sato Rikido, and soon the rest of 1A, they all encountered the drug hours before the supposed 11 p.m. kidnapping. What do you mean, detective? Nizu asked lightly. Oh, how was he itching for more information? He needed just a little more to really let his mind go loose. At 6:58, Sato brought out a dessert he made with imported extracts and shared with the class. Simultaneously, Midoriya was called out by a text message, leaving the dorms and returning 10 minutes later with a notebook in hand. Afterward, everyone was asleep by 8:30, Tsukachi read off. He looked right at Nizu. The dessert was good. However, to a few, it was too minty. The second Tsukachi said the word minty, Nizu got the idea. Loud and crystal clear. Minty, you say? Minty, Tsukachi said, eyes drilling into Nizu. A few heroes looked at this silent conversation and decided not to intervene. Nizu was glad too. If time was on their side, he would have explained his thought process to them, but time is not on their side. Time is their enemy. 1 second is already a battle lost to it. And Nizu hates losing. Nizu smiled a small knowing smile. How much? Specifics aside, enough TGWH 34 to put someone asleep without overpowering mint-flavored brownies? Highly concentrated then? Netsu mumbled aloud. He didn't keep up to date with all the drug reports on the news, but it was a logical enough conclusion to know the majority of drugs, TGWH 34 included, were rarely just that drug. They had other chemicals mixed in, lowering the intended effect for mass production. So, if this type of TGWH 34 in its small baking dosage was enough to knock out a class of teenagers, it had to be pretty close to the raw, unaltered form. Pure TGWH 34 is rare, Tsukachi continued as Netsu thought through thousands of possibilities. Its ingredients are hard to come by. Wait, are you saying that Sato tried to poison his classmates? Vlad King interrupted. He's a traitor? Several teachers were going to refute that statement, but Nizu merely raised a paw. Oh. Tsukachi said imported extracts. From whom, may I ask? Nizu asked the detective. Each family is interviewed along with their student before enrolling in the hero course to go over financial needs, forms, and waivers. When he talked with the Sato family, none of them had any connection to UA beforehand. With the dorms in place, he wouldn't be able to physically contact any outside source. While the chances of him being a traitor were there, it was just as probably as any other student in the school. His parents. I talked with them about said extracts and they said they sent them 2 weeks ago. Sato said he got them the other day. Tsukachi read from his notes. Meaning the kidnapper had 2 weeks to plant the drug in Sato's hands. Not necessarily for framing purposes, but for an unnoticed and accidental drugging. A smart but risky move. It seems like our kidnapper is full of those, Snipe huffed. It seems so. Nizu let Tsukachi's information roll around in his head. 2 weeks. This was obviously premeditated, but for how long? If his parents sent the extracts in 2 weeks ago and only this week did Sato receive them, then either Yue's mailing system had a backup, which he knew it did not, or the kidnapper somehow got a hold of it between it leaving the Sato household and arriving at Yue. And Netsu found it very unlikely someone tracked a package through a mailing warehouse too, so that left Yue. The kidnapper was on Yue's campus before Friday night. 2 weeks, Nizu said. Midnight, if you could go check the security camera on level B3, please? Nizu asked, taking another sip of his tea. B3 is where the mailing system was set up at Yue. Granted, there were no cameras inside the room, but there were plenty in the halls. Look for any disturbances or physical distortions in the footage. Midnight nodded, walking out of the room. Tonka, go with her, Tsukaichi said, pointing to one of his own officers. The less time it takes, the better. The officer nodded and followed the hero out of the room. You think they snuck onto the grounds? President Mike asked. Would that be possible? Heroes patrol the grounds and halls every hour. Would it be wise to sneak into a hero school 3 floors in the ground to steal one package? Ectoplasm asked. Nizu hummed, thinking to himself. Yes. UA may be Japan's #1 school, but no one is perfect. We let someone slip by, and for that, we are paying the price. The room was silent after his double-meaning statement hit deeper than intended. Please continue, detective. Tsukachi nodded. While the dessert was in fact drugged, Midoriya was coincidentally pulled from the dorms at the exact time. According to Todoroki Shoto, Midoriya's phone went off and he left, returning with a notebook 10 minutes later. The chances of Midoriya's phone coincidentally going off at the exact time a drug that would send his entire class asleep for the next 30-so hours seemed too coincidental. It seemed planned. The kidnapper somehow knew when to notify his phone to get Midoriya out of the dorms while the students drugged themselves. 2 questions, however. Who notified him? How did they know when the drug would go off? All of his classmates were around him and would need no reason to text him to leave the dorms in which they all were in. His mother could have texted him or called him, but why go outside when he can go to his room? And a phone call for 10 minutes? Mrs. Midoriya was in America for the time being. Tsukachi notified her of what happened and will be arriving back in Japan later on tomorrow. While that is one possibility, there was no planned way to sync the 2 occasions up, and America was close to 16 hours ahead of Japan's time zone. The only other person a teen would text that wasn't his family or his friends would be a mentor. Now, Nedza didn't know Midoriya Izuku very well, but if it wasn't his friends, not his family, not his homeroom teacher, then there was only one other person he could think of that could text Midoriya at such an hour. Thank you, Nizu said. He faced the detective again. Have you talked with All Might lately? Possibly about his phone records? What? How would All Might text him and not say anything about it? A second-year teacher asked. I think the #1 hero would have seen a text he never sent. Nizu nodded. That is true, however, All Might may have never seen the sent message. Say the kidnapper somehow stole All Might's phone, sent a message, and deleted it right after, replacing the phone before it was ever missed. Midoriya apparently left around 7 p.m. too. When the school officially closes, Cementos finished. That's clever. It is, Nizu said softly. 7 o'clock is when UA's main campus shuts down for the night. The doors are locked. Classrooms closed. Lights off. If the kidnapper needed urgency to get Midoriya out of the dorms, 7 o'clock, a time where he either goes then and get his notebook before he's locked out, on a Friday night, the night that starts the weekend, meaning if he didn't get his notebook, he'd have to wait till Monday to get it back, and by himself too, probably not wanting to let his friends know of his personal relationship with All Might. It'd be a perfect time. It was a 3-way plan success, and Nizu could help but be amazed at this planning. This person knew when the teachers left the school, when the school closed, the layout of the school, where the mailing room was, the process of receiving and sending student packages. They must have watched Midoriya, studied him and his classmates' interactions. They knew Midoriya's habits. who he hung out with, what his nights looked like, how he interacted with others. They knew the perfect time to enact their plan and it worked flawlessly. They really got us by the short and curlies, don't they? Snipe asked, rubbing his temples. No, Tsukachi said. Not quite. If this kidnapper watched 1A, I believe they watched them for their social interactions with Midoriya and less as Midoriya's quirked classmate. What do you mean? Someone asked. Jiro Kyoko, quirk earphone jack, has wide-ranged hearing, allowing her to hear the smallest of noises a good distance from herself, Tsukachi said, glancing down at his paper. Oh, I remember her. She did well in the first trial of the sports festival, the 3C teacher said. Yes, Tsukachi said. And with that, her quirk is always active. During the days, her conscience keeps it at bay and under control, however, at night, it tends to run wild. Thursday, a friend of hers broke her specially made headphones that block sound, forcing her to fall asleep Friday night hearing everything. Hang on, Present Mike said, holding up a hand. Don't tell me she heard something. Tsukachi nodded. Around 8:30 p.m. Friday night, Jiro heard someone walking the halls, stopping on the second floor. It was none of the students as everyone was asleep by then and neither Aizawa nor Yagi were there at 8:20 p.m. Midoriya was still downstairs at that time, Tsukachi said, meaning our kidnapper was already in the building when this all first started at 6:30 p.m. when dinner was first served. Someone would have seen them if they got in earlier. I also believe the second dose was administered sometime near or after 8:30 as Jiro soon fell asleep afterward. While it isn't much, we have a time frame now, Tsukachi continued. We have more than a time frame now, detective, Niza said, taking a sip from his room temperature tea. If Midoriya was still in the dorms at 8:20 and the second dose was administered then, Midoriya should not have woken up at 12 a.m. Saturday morning. TGWH34 is strong enough to knock a person out with one drop. Any ingestion of TGWH34 would have Midoriya asleep much longer, Niza said. How did they take him then? He looked like he was actually asleep in the video? A hero asked. I believe he was. Unless the kidnapper used a completely different form for TGWH34, the effects wouldn't line up. How they kidnapped him, sealed him in a coffin, and buried him alive all while he's asleep is extraordinary. The only way we'll know is if we catch them, Niza said softly. Smart are they? Ectoplasm sighed sarcastically. Patient. Hours, days, even weeks, this person watched, studied, and surveyed every aspect of this kidnapping. Excluding Jiro's outlaying factor, everything they did was for a reason. They had time to wait. Time to plan. Time to take. It's a direct mocking to us who have limited time to take. Limited time to plan. And no time to wait, Niza said, slowly. The realization of just how limited their time was seemed to hit them all. This person had the entire past to plan this one event out. The heroes only had 3.5 more days. Niza looked around at the conference room. The room was large. Even larger with the walls' windows letting in the beautiful day's sunshine. Leaves twirled through the air like red, yellow, and orange ballerinas while birds took peaceful flight in the fall breeze. The sky had no clouds in sight. Its pale blissful blue did nothing to subdue the sub's bright and shining rays, warming the cool day to a comfortable temperature. The fall scene was beautiful. Such a shame too. It really was a peaceful day. Time, 4:48 a.m.